Warcraft, the Tree of Eternity. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 576, Humanity's Defeat. There is no doubt that the sudden storm in the city of Cyric was Grom's work. This powerful storm, which turned ordinary houses and special wizard towers into ashes wherever it passed, was the most famous skill of the hero sword saint, Bladestorm. When Yufei found that Grom decisively used this skill, he could only watch the city of Cyric being turned into a mess, and the magicians in the wizard towers, scattered in the four directions of the city, were also annihilated together with the wizard towers and the Bladestorm. As he muttered to himself, "This is a big trouble." The reason why the human troops outside the city of Cyric were able to temporarily be in a tense battle with the orc troops was because of the sharp magic support in the city of Cyric. Now Grom has wiped out these magicians and even the wizard towers, and the magic support of the human troops is naturally gone. Yufei finally understood. No wonder the human side was still losing ground in the battle with the orcs, even though the three empires united. It turned out that the damn sword saint Grom played a great role. In the previous battle, although Yufei showed extremely strong magic control and made good use of the magic power contributed by the human mage group, it was impossible that there was no one who could not match the hidden strength of Yufei among so many magicians in the human country. In other words, the human camp must have had the same sharp magic support as Yufei before when fighting the orcs. But the orcs had Grom, so this kind of magic support could only be short-lived on the battlefield. From the battlefield in Cyric City, Yufei could already associate that in most of the previous battles, the mage group of the human side was killed so aggrievedly, which made the human side always lose more than win. In the state of Bladestorm, Grom will be in a magic immunity state. Therefore, Yufei could not stop Grom from fully exerting the power of this powerful skill. However, the duration of this skill was not very long. After the wizard towers in the four directions of Cyric City were crushed, the storm of sword blades gradually stopped. Yufei stared at the place where the storm finally stopped, and Grom's green figure appeared there. Wow, a burst of hearty laughter rang out. Grom naturally would not fail to notice Yufei, who was carried over by the golden vines and the sword blade storm. He stood in the void and looked at Yufei. "Well, Sunzi, I admit that you are very strong, but what's the use? Don't you have to watch you humans fail? Oh, you can't catch me. Don't waste your energy." The last sentence was said by Grom after he dodged a flying golden vine. Isn't this guy very stupid? How can he take advantage of me? Hearing Grom's "World Sunzi," Yufei was very surprised while angry. Before Yufei could curse back, Grom just said something and then ran away with the wind step. "Okay, Grandpa is leaving. Sunzi, you don't have to see me off. I don't think you can do anything without those human magicians." Hahaha, fuck KOKO. The veins on Yufei's forehead popped out. This is really intolerable. This wretched damn swordsman actually escaped after just one word of mouth cannon. It's really fucking cheap. He really deserves the title of cheap saint. The more Yufei thought about it, the angrier he became. It was obviously him who played Grom around at the beginning, but in the end he was still taken advantage of by this stupid orc. No, it can't end like this. After being provoked by Grom, Yufei's heart ignited with a long-lost anger, and he felt that he must do something. Huh, right. Didn't that damn Grom say that he could only watch humans fail? Didn't he say that he would be useless without those human magicians? Let him see how he can change the situation on his own. Yufei decided that, even if he exposed part of his true strength, he would let the 8th Root Army and the new 4th Army win this battle. Of course, this was not just to fight with Grom, but more because Yufei also believed that humans could not be defeated like this. If the orcs easily conquered the human world, what would happen to the Night Elves? Two divided forces are much easier to deal with than a unified force. Yufei left the city of Cyric without saying a word and flew towards the place where the human and orc troops were fighting. The blade storm in Cyric City was so powerful that both sides noticed the changes in the city on the battlefield only 1,000 meters away from the city. The orcs naturally knew that this was the work of their own heroes, and their morale was boosted for a while. On the human side, because of some previous battles, they also knew that there was a powerful orc who had no moral integrity and loved to sneak attack the magicians in the rear. Officers such as Paramount were all as hen. Sure enough, not long after the storm started, the magic support from the human side disappeared. The orcs were pleasantly surprised to find that the ground spikes that often appeared suddenly in the chrysanthemum area no longer appeared, and they no longer had to worry about being ***. The disappearance of magic support not only meant that humans lost a major means, but also reversed the moral comparison between the two sides. Before, the orcs were busy guarding against the ground spikes that might appear at any time and the occasional fireball wind blades that fell, and their fighting was messed up by these magics. The human soldiers took the initiative, and the magicians were unexpectedly very powerful. They saw the hope of victory and fought desperately. In laser, the general troops would fall into the brink of collapse after the casualties exceeded 30%, but this time the human troops were still in high morale, even though the cavalry was destroyed, and the infantry gradually suffered heavy losses in the battle with the orcs. One of the reasons for this was the magician's power. But now the magicians have been annihilated by the storm, and the sharp magic support has disappeared. This caused the human soldiers to gradually lose their previous courage and recover from their bloodthirsty state. In fact, on the battlefield, the best state for soldiers is to focus on fighting and not think about other things. The generals will do the deployment of troops and formations. It is not a good thing for soldiers to think too much. Just like now, the human soldiers who calmed down a little soon realized that without the support of the magician, the outcome of this battle would definitely be the failure of the human side. With this thought, they almost had no will to fight. In just half a minute, the situation on the battlefield changed from the previous stalemate to the current defeat of the human side. No matter how strong the officers such as Paramount were, there was nothing they could do now. With a roar, Paramount did not retreat to the city of Zurich with most of the soldiers, but turned back with his own soldiers to fight back against the chasing orc troops. He knew that the outcome of this battle was doomed, but he did not want to run away like this. If possible, Paramount hoped to kill a few more orcs before his death. A small number of human soldiers near Paramount were inspired by their commander's behavior and turned back to kill the orcs. However, most of the soldiers still retreated to the city of Zurich. The human soldiers who were originally at the back of the army and became the front army during the retreat were horrified to find a figure flying out of the city of Zurich. They thought that this was the orc warrior who had created a huge storm in the city and killed all their magicians. However, when the figure flew closer, they found that it was not an orc, but a mysterious figure covered in a black robe. "Earl O'Brien," an officer exclaimed. The ordinary soldiers did not know him, but most of the officers knew the head of the mage group. The officer was suspicious. What? Did the head of the mage group escape from the terrifying storm? But it was useless. Earl O'Brien seemed to be just a legendary mage. He was powerless in a battle of this scale alone. Yufei didn't care about the human soldiers under him. He had expected the defeat of the human side. What he wanted to do, and was doing now, was the move that Grom thought was impossible to turn the tide. Chapter 577, The Arrival of the Tree World. Kill. Paramount swung the heavy sword in his hand, which looked very rough and did not match his position as a legion leader, and fiercely split the chest of a green-skinned orc warrior. If it were those noble officers, even if they practiced fighting spirit, they would generally hold the decorative rapiers used by nobles, and their fighting power can be imagined. But Paramount rose to the position of legion leader step by step from an ordinary soldier relying on military merit. With the strength of the sky level, his fighting power should not be underestimated. There were only a few human soldiers around Paramount. Those who could hold on until now were the officers who came from the bottom with Paramount and his personal soldiers. The orcs were busy chasing the fleeing large army and did not care much about the small team that stayed behind. So Paramount and others held on. Thousands of troops cut. A wide wave of fighting spirit flew out from Paramount's heavy sword and crossed the bodies of several orcs. Except for a minotaur who used a totem pole as a shield to block the attack, the rest of the orcs were all cut in half. Unfortunately, this was the last bit of fighting spirit that Paramount could exert. Although he was a sky-level warrior, he had already consumed a lot of fighting spirit in the previous battles. Now he took the initiative to cut off the rear, and the fighting intensity was even higher. It had only been more than half a minute, and he had almost exhausted all his strength. No, I can't fall down like this. After launching 1,000 army slash, Paramount felt empty inside, and his legs suddenly became weak. He relied on the heavy sword as a crutch to support himself, and barely managed to not fall down. As a native of the Holy Lion Empire, Paramount lead about his age, and joined the army at the age of 15. Then, in 20 years, he went from being a low-ranking soldier when he first joined the army to the position of the commander of the 8th Army of the Empire. No one could imagine Paramount's feelings for the army and the Holy Lion Empire. The invasion of the Orcs made the Empire exhausted, and Paramount was the first to apply to the military and the Holy Emperor to go to war. However, because the serial number of the 8th Army was relatively late, it was not equipped with a magic regiment before, so it was not until now that he was able to fight the Orcs. Paramount didn't want to fail in his first battle with the Orcs. This was not because he was afraid that failure would affect his status and reputation, but because he didn't want to see the Empire's retreat. However, reality cannot be changed by human will. It seems that the 8th Army and the new 4th Army have already failed in this battle against the Orcs. On the battlefield, when one side begins to flee, it means that the battle has been completely defeated, and there is not even a chance of a comeback, unless a miracle happens. Relying on the 1,000 army slash that Paramount had issued before, although his fighting spirit was exhausted, he finally cleared a small piece of open space, allowing him to breathe. Paramount slowly closed his eyes and murmured to himself, "God, can you give the 8th Army a miracle?" Of course. The decisive voice sounded, and the tone was filled with extreme confidence. What? Paramount quickly opened his eyes and looked at the black-robed figure that suddenly appeared in front of him in surprise. Earl O'Brien? Paramount was surprised. Didn't this Imperial Earl and head of the mage group fall into the city of Zurich? In the previous war reports of the Empire, almost no magician could escape from the hands of the Orcs. Paramount pinched his thigh hard to see if he had hallucinations at the moment of death, and the pain in his thigh confirmed that Yufei did appear in front of him and answered his muttered questions. He opened his mouth and wanted to ask Yufei what of course meant. However, before his dry throat could make a sound, Yufei took off again and stood above him. Then, Paramount heard a low voice, "Tree, world, descend, come." Then, in front of Paramount's eyes, no, all around him appeared a scene that he would never forget in his life. On the huge battlefield outside the city of Zurich where hundreds of thousands of troops from the two tribes were fighting, a miracle suddenly appeared. Countless green spots of light fell from the sky. The Orcs and humans were alert to avoid these spots of light, but then they found that, even if these spots of light fell on them, they would only pass through them, and eventually reach the ground. When these countless green spots of light fell to the ground of the entire battlefield was cracked everywhere. Young saplings emerged from these cracks, and they grew up rapidly at an unimaginable speed. It only took 10 seconds for a towering tree to appear in every place where a spot of light fell. These trees were not all the same, but had different shapes. However, one thing was that the height of each tree reached more than 20 meters. Such tall trees can only be seen in deep mountains and old forests. A huge forest appeared outside the city of Zurich. What is this situation? Every human and orc who was fighting stopped the battle at hand. The sudden magical situation made them lose the desire to fight. If S-Laser had not had such a thing as a time travel novel, they would definitely think that everyone had traveled together. Some well-informed human officers and orc leaders were the first to react. This forest should be the product of magic. However, after knowing this, the reactions of the top leaders of both sides were different. Although the human officers did not know who created this forest, magic must be related to humans. The orcs who invaded the human world did not know why they could not use magic. Paramount knew that this forest was created by Earl O'Brien above his head, but he could not see Yufei now because of the trees. The orc leaders looked gloomy. This included Grom, who had quietly withdrawn to the orc camp. None of the new orcs like them could use magic, and those special abilities given by God did not have such a large range of skills. This forest was obviously not created by the orcs. Then, only humans could cast such magic. Grom's face was particularly ugly among the orcs, because he knew that Yufei, a magician, was still alive in Zurich City. Eupheni's strength was unique to him in his long battles in the human world. Other human magicians, even if they were epic, would still die under his sword. Thinking of his provocation to the black-robed magician when he left Zurich City, Grom had a bad feeling in his heart. Could it be that his provocation caused the magician to explode and create such a big scene? Well, Grom was not wrong. In fact, Eupheni was not planning to make such a big scene in the human world. After all, his identity was not to be seen in the light. Earls and the like were only considered middle-level titles. Although they were not a lot in the Holy Lion Empire, they were not very eye-catching. If he made a big scene and made himself embarrassed, it would be bad. If rumors spread that the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire also yearned for human life and became a small earl. But Grom's provocation was really unbearable for Eupheni. After coming to the world of S-Laser for so long, he had always been the only one to bully others. When did a greenskin ghost dare to call him his grandson? Well, Eupheni had naturally ignored the fact that he was the one who teased Grom first. So, if Grom hadn't said those two words to make himself look bad, the battle would have been defeated by the human side as usual, and the orcs would have continued to advance with great momentum. It would not be like this now, because the sudden appearance of a forest has made the battle situation fall into a confusing scene. The forest on the battlefield was formed after Eupheni used the ultimate skill of his avatar, the Elf King, the Tree World. This skill was born out of the spells that Eupheni's original body, the Eternal Tree, could cast, and it belongs to the category of advanced spells. After being transformed into the ultimate skill of the Elf King hero unit, it became a domain skill similar to Illidan's Demon Domain, which can form a large forest. As for the lethality of this skill, the orcs will soon see it. Thanks to the book friend Wendy Hay for the reward of 200 Nyangbi. Thanks to the book friend Hang Beibu CD Poverty for the 5 monthly tickets. PS. 5 tickets. Han Chen was scared to death. Chapter 578 The Arrival of the Tree World. If Illidan's Demon Realm is more used to enhance his own strength, then the arrival of the Tree Realm is a completely strategic skill. In terms of the killing effect, the arrival of the Tree Realm does not have the demonic aura in the Demon Realm that can be transformed into various weapons or directly corrode the enemy's body, and is not as good as the Demon Realm. In terms of attribute bonus, the arrival of the Tree Realm can only greatly increase the life recovery of friendly forces within the domain. Although it is a large recovery, based on a percentage, it is not as much as the tranquility of the old deer, and it does not have the comprehensive attribute bonus of the Demon Realm. But Eupheni chose the arrival of the Tree Realm as the ultimate skill of his clone, so this skill is definitely not useless. Think about it, what is the hero profession of Eupheni's clone? Elf King. As a king, how can he personally participate in the action of fighting and killing? Just looking at the skills assigned by Eupheni to the Elf King clone, it can be seen that the individual combat power of the Elf King is not too strong. In addition to the Vines and Leaf Dance, which are considered offensive skills, the other 3 small skills, Moisturizing, Will Reading and Plant Enlightenment, are not offensive. Moreover, the Vines should be considered as control skills. Only when the vine seeds used as the casting materials are special, the offensiveness is relatively high. Correspondingly, after sacrificing the lethality and attribute bonus of the ultimate skill, the Tree World descends. It has the ability in other directions. First of all, the range of the Tree World descends is large enough. The Demon Domain can absorb tens of thousands of enemies, which is already very good. But the forest formed by the Tree World descends now wraps up more than 500,000 humans and orcs in total. Secondly, the power of the Tree World descends is not actually reflected in the lethality of the skill. The damage caused by this skill actually comes from hoo-la la, the sound of a large number of leaves shaking sounded. The humans and orcs who were confused in the forest suddenly found that all the big trees around them pulled out their roots from the soil, turned into 2 thick wooden legs, and stood up. And the branches of those big trees also turned into wooden arms. In the middle of each tree trunk, there appeared a strange face that looked like a tree scar. The trees in this forest had turned into tall tree men. Even the Tauren among the orcs were just small men in front of the tree men, who were generally 30 meters tall. Perhaps compared to ordinary tree men, the Tauren was much stronger. If a Tauren and an ordinary orc were to fight one-on-one, the Tauren would definitely tear the tree man into firewood. but this was on the battlefield, and the advantage of size was very obvious. Besides, who said that these tree men were all ordinary tree men? Just when a Tauren was surprised by the sudden appearance of the forest and tree men, a tree man with a golden luster behind him quietly hugged the Tauren with his two thick branches, and then a pool of Leogan beef sauce appeared on the ground. That's right, the advent of the tree world is more of a summoning skill than a domain skill. It's just that the range of this summoning skill is too large to become a domain. Summoning treemen is a skill that jungle guardians also have, but that natural force that requires a medium and summons a small number of treemen is too weak compared to Yufei's tree world descent. After all, the tree world descent is also self-produced and sold, and a forest can be created without trees to summon treemen. The forest formed by the super large tree world descent is composed of about 100,000 large trees. After turning into treemen, the number is naturally 100,000. Of course, the large number also means the lack of quality. Compared with legendary and epic summons such as the Fire Phoenix Hellfire, the strength of these tall treemen is mostly only about silver level. But this is also abnormal enough. Who can create an army of 100,000 with an average strength of silver level with one skill? In the world of S-Laser, the strong have never been able to do much on the front battlefield, but Yufei can break this conclusion. Moreover, among these 100,000 treemen, there are also treemen with stronger strength. For example, the golden treeman who had hugged a Tauren to death before was an ancient tree spirit that only appeared in every 10,000 treemen. Its strength was the same as paramount sky level. In addition, there was an ancient tree spirit with a strength of gold level in every 100 treemen, and there was an ancient tree spirit with a strength of cloud level in every 1000 treemen. The strength of these tree spirits seemed ordinary, but the damage they could cause on the battlefield with their tall bodies far exceeded the nominal level. At first, Yufei was going to bury all the humans and orcs in the advent of the tree world. However, after discovering Paramount's desperate action of turning back, and his words of longing for a miracle, he was touched, and chose to kill only the orcs. Forget it. Anyway, it was impossible for him to leave a fish that slipped through the net, and the situation here would definitely be exposed to people, so there was no need to kill humans just to silence them. Yufei knew that he was soft-hearted. These human troops would most likely be the resistance of the Night Elves to unify S-Lays in the future. But for now, they are still his comrades in arms. If he turned against them like this, it would be a bit against his bottom line. Well, he was helping the weak to fight the strong. Yufei found a reason for himself, and then he let the humans go with peace of mind, and ordered the tree people to kill all the orc soldiers. The orcs were miserable now. They didn't expect that this suddenly appeared forest would suddenly turn into countless orcs. Many orcs stayed under the big trees without any defense. When the tree people stood up, they were strangled to death by the tangled tree roots. When the tree people received Yufei's order to really fight, the orcs felt even more desperate. With the power of God, the orc infantry, whose physique was greatly enhanced, was in an absolute advantage over the human soldiers. But when the branches of Mixu's thickness carried great potential energy and swung at them, this strength could not save their lives. The tree people had many branches, but generally only the two thickest branches were used for fighting. Each tree man's two thick arms were like two golf clubs, easily knocking away the orc warriors as if they were golf balls. Many orcs died in the air, spurting blood. Only the Tauren could stand firm under the attack of the tree men. Waving the totem pole, the Tauren could easily resist the swing of the tree men's branches. Only the stronger ancient, and even ancient tree spirits could deal with these Tauren. However, even if the Tauren could persist in this sea of trees, the practical significance was not great. This was a war, and Yufei did not ask for the orc army to be completely wiped out. As long as a large number of ordinary orc warriors were slaughtered, even if the elite troops of the orcs survived, it would still be useless. In this battle, the human side would win. The orcs did not try to fight back, including Grom. The orc leaders and the more powerful soldiers were trying their best to cut down these tree men. But the benefits of the huge size of the tree men were now reflected. Cutting down giant trees that were 30 meters high and several meters in diameter was not a simple matter. Moreover, the percentage life recovery effect brought by the advent of the tree world also appeared. Although this percentage is relatively low, for the tree people with huge vitality, this low percentage also means a lot of vitality. Except for those orc leaders, who are strong enough, ordinary tauren and the like will recover quickly, even if they can cause damage to the tree people. The humans were also stagnant at the beginning. But when they found that the large number of tree people who suddenly appeared only attacked the orcs and not them, they reacted and became excited. These tree people are friendly forces. It's time for us to fight back. Paramount, who knew the inside story, reacted first, mustered up a little fighting spirit that had just recovered, and filled the forest with his voice. Then, the human soldiers cooperated with the tree people to slaughter the orcs who had just slaughtered them. Chapter 579 Reverence. In fact, if the morale had not dropped sharply due to the loss of magic support, the 8th army and the new 4th army combined could have fought the orcs attacking Zurich City on equal terms. After all, at the beginning, the human side took the initiative and first eliminated the wolf cavalry troops among the orcs. When the defeated human soldiers were included in the forest formed by the arrival of the tree world, they were panicked at first, but soon found that the tree people did not attack them. After hearing the shouts from Paramount, they were relieved and responded one after another, and began to turn around and fight back. The power of the tree people is great, but their flexibility is somewhat insufficient. If the area covered by the tree world was not too large, so that the orcs were directly surrounded by the tree people, they could easily deal with it by using the tactics of fighting. However, even if they were surrounded, the number of orc soldiers was more than that of the tree people, and the tree people with insufficient flexibility found it difficult to take care of several enemies at the same time. When the humans turned around and joined the battle, the situation changed a lot. Although the humans could not cause a lot of damage to the orcs whose individual strength was much stronger than theirs, they still had the ability to entangle the orcs and make them unable to dodge flexibly. Once the orc warriors were entangled by human soldiers, a thick branch would often swing down and bring destruction to them. For a time, the loss rate of the orcs rose sharply, and the combination of humans and tree people seemed very tacit. Yufei was also lamenting a coincidence at this time. The armor type of the tree people was city armor, and they would appear to be more vulnerable when facing siege type soldiers such as wolf cavalry. However, the wolf cavalry had been completely solved before, so the tree people now seemed so strong, and they were almost immortal with the addition of the advent of the tree world. The pressure brought to the orcs by the cooperation of humans and tree people was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. Originally, they could only support the tree people, but when the human soldiers woke up and joined the battle under the call of Paramount, the orcs were in a situation of defeat. What's worse is that, because they were surrounded by a large number of tree people, the defeated orcs didn't even have a place to escape. This was not as good as the humans who escaped from them before. At least the humans had the idea of escaping back to Zurich City. In fact, the orcs were defeated so quickly because they were surrounded by tree people. The orcs on each small battlefield could only see their own disadvantages and could not see the situation of their friendly forces. The fear in their hearts was infinitely magnified, and they easily collapsed. The duration of the tree world's advent was limited after all. After half an hour, all the tree people turned into green spots and disappeared into thin air. Outside Zurich City, only a bunch of excited humans and a few confused orcs were left. Indeed, confused. These orcs who finally got rid of the nightmare looked around, and their faces were full of confusion. Where did the 200,000 orc army go? Why is it that when I look around, I can only see human figures everywhere, and it is difficult to see a few familiar green-skinned compatriots? Yufei, whose mental power covered the entire battlefield, was able to calculate that there were less than 30,000 orcs left outside the city of Zurich, among which the number of orc infantry was the smallest. On a hill far away from the battlefield, Grom, with several small flags behind him, was looking at the scene outside the city of Zurich with anger and disbelief. When the tree world had just appeared, and 100,000 giant trees had just transformed into tree people, Grom saw that the situation was not good, and used the wind step to escape from the coverage of the tree world. Although the tree world is a domain skill and there is a barrier, the super large skill range means that the strength of the barrier is definitely not enough. At least it can't stop a strong man like Grom. But if possible, Grom hopes that he can stay in the domain of the tree world. Although he can't do anything in the face of 100,000 tree people, if he stays in the domain, at least he won't have to watch the orcs die and get injured all the time. The cooling time of the blade storm is relatively long, so Grom can't use this big move to rescue the orcs. And even if it could be used, the blade storm couldn't do much in front of 100,000 tree people. In a storm, the forest can always greatly weaken its wind force. So, Grom, who could do nothing, just watched the 200,000 orc army, and was destroyed step by step under the siege of tree people and humans. He regretted provoking Yuffie when he left Zurich City. Maybe if he hadn't said a word, this wouldn't have happened, right? And when Grom heard a voice from afar, his regret intensified. What else, Grom? Do you see the current situation? You must know that there is a price to pay for talking too much. However, the price of my talking too much is just a bite back from you, while the price of your talking too much is the price of hundreds of thousands of orcs' lives. Wahahahaha. This voice was naturally made by Yuffie. Although he couldn't find Grom, who escaped with the wind step, he could judge that he should be nearby, so he directly spread his voice. Grom did not respond to Yuffie's words. He knew that if he showed up, he would only bring shame upon himself. He walked down the hill silently, and even stopped thinking about saving the remaining less than 30,000 orcs, because he knew he couldn't do it. As for the grudge with Yuffie, he could only avenge it in the future. Sitting here in such a big scene, the magician who had never told him his name would definitely become famous. Grom didn't believe that he couldn't beat him in a head-on confrontation, and he couldn't keep sneaking in the dark with a wind step. Yuffie didn't know Grom's thoughts. He didn't receive a response, so he naturally knew that the swordsman chose to shrink this time, which made him very happy. But soon, Yuffie's face under the hood turned into a bitter face. Damn, I was just busy having fun. Now that such a big scene has been created, how should it end? It seems that no one in S-Laser has ever reversed a battle with more than 500,000 troops by himself like himself. After all, mythical strongmen are generally regarded as the country's heavy weapons, and there has never been a situation where mythical strongmen go to the battlefield. After imagining the various troubles and disputes that might arise after his identity was discovered, Yuffie had the idea of just running away. No, he couldn't just run away like that. Yuffie quickly rejected the idea of running away. If he just disappeared, it might cause a bigger wave, and the identity of Earl O'Brien would no longer be used. Correspondingly, the Lord O'Brien would no longer be able to use it. Besides, things might not be that bad. Yuffie thought about it. His identity as the Elf King has always been relatively low-key. He only appeared in front of the human countries at the founding ceremony, and he has never exposed his abilities. In this case, it is unlikely that the skill of descending from the tree world can be linked to his identity as the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. Then the only thing to worry about is that his elf appearance will be discovered, thus causing his identity to be exposed. But if you are willing, it is not impossible to deal with it. He has already shown such a strong strength. Strong people are all a little quirky. It is always understandable that he doesn't want others to see a little flaw in his appearance, right? After thinking about it, Yuffie calmed down a little and no longer thought about how to escape, but talked with Paramount, who flew into the air with a look of awe on his face. Paramount was in a very complicated mood now. If he was Chinese, he might sigh at this moment. The ups and downs of life are really exciting. Unfortunately, he is not. So he can only hold back the excitement in his heart and come to Yuffie with reverence. Master Aberlinba, please tell me what to do next. After witnessing the unforgettable scene in his life, Paramount was already very convinced of Yuffie in his heart, and even took the initiative to hand over his power to Yuffie. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 580, The Holy Emperor's Thoughts. Yuffie was stunned. What did the 8th Root Army commander mean? Why did he ask him what to do? He was only the head of the Mage Corps, and now he was a lone head. When he saw the respectful look in Paramount's eyes, he realized that it was his powerful strength that convinced the Corps commander. But Yufei didn't need to seize this little power. He couldn't keep a low profile now. Lord Paramount, I'm just a magician and don't know anything about military affairs. What we should do next is up to you, the Orthodox Corps commander. Yufei looked extremely humble. Paramount was a little panicked. Don't call me Lord. How can I deserve such a title from you? But since the Lord Mage has spoken, I will go to arrange military affairs. To be honest, Paramount, who climbed up from the bottom as a soldier, would never appear in such a servile manner. Not to mention that Yufei was only an earl, even in front of the Duke of the Holy Lion Empire. Paramount, as the commander of the Legion, was very confident. But the shock that Yufei brought to him was too great, and no one could understand Paramount's feeling of being saved from despair. Therefore, under the dual effects of strength and favor, this grassroots Legion commander, who was known for not fearing the powerful in the Empire, appeared to be so humble. However, since Yufei had said that he would not interfere with him in dealing with the next matter, Paramount would naturally not do the same thing as Liu Bei, who had to visit Zhuge Liang 3 times and insisted on asking him to come out. After all, Zhuge Liang was a great talent in Liu Bei's heart, and although Paramount respected Yufei, he did not think that this powerful magician would arrange military affairs. Under Yufei's attention, Paramount began to clean up the battlefield in an orderly manner. First, he pulled the human soldiers out of their excitement, and then commanded the soldiers who still had spare strength to get rid of the remaining orcs as soon as possible. Of course, the solution here does not mean killing them. It would be a waste to kill those orcs who have no resistance at all. Paramount's arrangement is to capture all the surviving orcs and present them to the Holy Emperor later. The scene on the battlefield was really tragic. The treemen summoned by Yufei attacked with great force. Most of the orcs killed by the treemen were left with only a pile of meat paste. There is obviously no need to deal with such meat paste, even beef paste. Moreover, the weapons of the orcs are not as good as those of humans, which is also an aspect that the human side can occupy a little. Therefore, there is no need to collect the weapons of the orcs, which makes it much easier for the human side to clean up the battlefield. After a little observation, Yufei was not interested in this kind of thing. He simply flew back to the city of Zurich, where many buildings were destroyed in the Blade Storm, and waited for Paramount to come to him after cleaning up the battlefield. This battle lasted only about an hour, but it took an afternoon to clean up the battlefield. The main reason was that it was difficult to find Bowser's body in a pile of meat paste, which wasted a lot of time for human soldiers. After the situation outside Zurich City was completely calm, Paramount appeared in front of Yufei again. Your Excellency the Grand Mage, the battlefield has been cleaned up. What we have to do next is just to pass on the battle situation in Zurich City, and then stay here and wait for the next instructions from the Empire. Paramount bowed his head in front of Yufei and said so. Well, it's good, so be it. Yufei didn't know what to say, so he just laughed. But after he said that, Paramount didn't leave, but continued to stand in front of him. Anything else? Yufei was a little confused. Hearing his question, Paramount looked embarrassed. Your Excellency the Grand Mage, all the magicians in the army have died. If I want to pass on the battle situation to the Empire, I have to trouble you. Obviously, Paramount himself felt that it was a bit embarrassing to let an epic Grand Mage do such a small thing. However, Yufei didn't care much and quickly agreed. Although he was not an Orthodox Sla's native magician, it was not difficult for him to transmit magic messages with only mental power. Of course, Yufei was not good at writing war reports, so Paramount dictated them, and then Yufei delivered them. However, Yufei felt a little embarrassed when he heard Paramount's praise for him in the report. The Legion commander really praised him too much. The Empire responded quickly. Within 3 hours of the message being transmitted back, a new order was issued. You know, it was already night, and Yufei didn't expect that the military of the Holy Lion Empire was still working at night. What Yufei didn't know was that after the battle situation in Zurich City was transmitted, the shock caused was extremely huge. Even the Holy Emperor, who had already gone to bed, crawled out of the bed and listened to the report on the battle in Zurich City. The new magic message sent by the Holy Lion Empire to the 8th Army and the new 4th Army was that the two armies would be temporarily merged and commanded by Paramount and stay in Zurich City to prevent the subsequent invasion of the Orcs and wait for further support and orders from the Empire. The commander of the new 4th Army had been killed in the previous battle, so it was only natural for Paramount to temporarily take charge of the two legions. It is worth mentioning that Yu Fei had not even seen this noble officer who had just become the commander of the legion not long ago, but he noticed the officer death squad in the new 4th Army, which was also known as the Big Knife Squad. When the human army was defeated, in addition to some soldiers led by Paramount who rose up to resist, only this officer death squad chose to fight the Orcs to death. In fact, unlike the soldiers led by Paramount, they took the initiative to fight to the death. It's a pity that the gun hits the first bird. Although those officers are not weak, they are not as strong as Paramount. They were almost dead before Yu Fei took action. The current new 4th Army can really be said to be the newest army, and there is almost no member of the original 4th Army of the Holy Lion Empire. Yu Fei quickly conveyed the order from the Holy Lion Empire to Paramount. How Paramount arranged military affairs was naturally not his concern. What he was thinking about now was how to hide his identity in the future. What Yu Fei didn't know was that the great victory of humans in Zurich City was soon spread. The Holy Emperor was still very annoyed when he was woken up from his bed, but when he calmed down and listened to the battle report from Zurich City, his anger instantly turned into joy. Since the Orcs showed their strong siege ability, humans have been defeated. This is the first time he has heard good news. After knowing the cause and effect of the great victory in Zurich City, even the Holy Emperor was shocked. Based on Paramount's language description alone, the Holy Emperor could imagine the grand scene brought by the advent of the Tree World, which was a forbidden magic in Paramount's eyes. Even as the inheritor of the Holy Empire among humans, the Holy Emperor had never heard of magic like the advent of the Tree World. Among those well-known forbidden spells, even the fire forbidden spells such as the Earth Fire Burning City cannot kill hundreds of thousands of Orcs. How come I have never heard of such a powerful great mage before? The Holy Emperor sighed in his heart. No, isn't the head of the 8th Army's Mage Corps the Earl of O'Brien who was personally instructed by him? Isn't that Earl who seems to be related to the St. Chilled family just a suspected legendary spiritual magician? How can he have such a powerful strength? The Holy Emperor remembered that he had heard of Yu Fei's name, but the name of Earl O'Brien was shrouded in the halo of the St. Chilled family, so he didn't pay attention to it. Now it seems that he neglected it. Even the St. Chilled family itself, I'm afraid there is no such a powerful magician. As for the St. Chilled family, the Holy Emperor is confident that he knows more about it. This great mage who is almost equivalent to the mythical level, will definitely not be a member of the St. Chilled family. In this case, can the royal family win over this great mage? The Holy Emperor thought so. Chapter 581, Hard Work in Publicity. As the Holy Emperor, he was not sure whether he could win over a great wizard like Yu Fei who had a mythical combat power. However, this did not prevent him from building momentum for the great victory of the humans in Zurich City. After a little thought, a series of orders were issued from the palace, and all departments of the Holy Imperial Capital and even the governments of all parts of the Holy Lion Empire began to operate. When the people of the Holy Lion Empire woke up, they found that the sky seemed to have changed overnight. The entire empire was filled with a happy festive atmosphere. Many residents of the empire were confused and did not know why the tense atmosphere suddenly became so cheerful against the background of the invasion of the Orcs. This also included the residents of the Holy Imperial Capital. Milu habitually slept in until the sun rose to the middle of the sky, and the descendant of the nobility who had no worries about food and clothing got up from the bed. After washing up, he stepped onto the street to have breakfast, but he was dazed to find that the sky in the Imperial Capital seemed to have changed. Hasn't the Imperial Capital always been a tense atmosphere of preparation for war? I remember that the slogan of the royal family was not to repeat the shame of being beaten to the Imperial Capital by the Dark Knight Empire. Even on the streets of the Imperial Capital, many troops were often seen in a hurry. But now, what appeared in front of Milu was a relaxed and happy scene. The soldiers on the street disappeared, replaced by a newspaper boy who was shouting hard to sell newspapers. You know, because the war on the front line has always been unfavorable to the human side, newspapers have been stopped for a while. This is to control public opinion. Milu, as a descendant of the nobility, is still very clear about this. and on the doors of the shops on both sides of the streets in the imperial capital, purple ribbons are hung one by one. The meaning of purple in Slays is equivalent to the red of China on Earth, representing the meaning of celebration. Could it be that I slept for several months? Melu felt a little absurd, especially when he saw that a patrol office in the imperial capital, equivalent to the police station, was also decorated with purple ribbons, even more than ordinary shops. This kind of festive atmosphere can only appear after the Empire defeats the Orcs, right? Or is it that His Majesty the Holy Emperor has taken a concubine again? Melu, who was full of doubts, suddenly heard clearly what the newsboys were shouting. Newspapers for sale. The 8th Army and the new 4th Army of the Empire of Zurich City in the Falling Moon Kingdom defeated the Orcs and annihilated 300,000 enemies. The powerful forbidden spell of the great wizard Earl O'Brien turned the tide and established the victory in one fell swoop. What? The Empire defeated the Orcs? Is this true? Melu almost couldn't help shouting. He had more information channels than the average people of the Empire, and he knew that the Empire was obviously losing ground in the battle with the Orcs. How could it be possible to have such a great victory overnight? Annihilating 300,000 enemies. Is it possible? Melu was a little unconvinced. Even if there were twice as many Imperial soldiers, it would be difficult to defeat 300,000 Orcs, let alone annihilate them. But he suddenly thought of the words Great Wizard Earl O'Brien and forbidden spell in the newspaper fairy language, and he was a little shaken. Eager to understand all this, Melu hurriedly took out a silver coin and wanted to buy a newspaper to see the details. However, what he didn't expect was that the newsboy actually refused his silver coins, but told him crisply that this issue of the newspaper was free, and anyone who wanted it could get it for free. It was said that this was an order issued by the imperial government. Melu took the newspaper handed over by the newsboy with some surprise, and quickly flipped through it. This issue of the newspaper only had one piece of news. No wonder it was free. Melu saw this newspaper with only one page, and subconsciously thought. Then, he couldn't help but get excited when he read the news in the newspaper. It's really a big victory. This is the news said by His Majesty the Holy Emperor himself, and His Majesty will not lie. No. This news must be shared with his friends. Melu didn't bother to eat breakfast and ran to a place where they, the descendants of nobles, often gathered, holding the newspaper in his hand, in a manner of medium size in the imperial capital. Bang! The sound of the door being slammed open was heard, and Melu rushed into a hall full of sofas and small tables. Then, before he could see the situation in the hall clearly, he shouted excitedly, "Hey! Do you know? His Majesty said that we defeated the Orcs on the front line." However, after he finished shouting, he found that there was no response in the hall. After calming down, Melu realized that his gang of friends were all in the hall, but they all looked at him with contempt. What's going on? A young man with blonde hair and a handsome face in the hall spoke. Melu, I'm afraid that only you, a guy who is used to staying in bed, know this news now? You haven't even finished reading what's written in the newspaper. Melu was stunned. How did Ryan know that he only read it roughly and ran here? He quickly unfolded the newspaper in his hand and read it carefully. And the blonde Ryan was still talking there. If you want to read it, you will definitely not shout. His Majesty said that we defeated the Orcs on the front line, but the great Earl O'Brien killed more than 200,000 Orcs with a forbidden spell. Melu didn't care what Ryan said, because he had seen the key point. The newspaper copied the war report of Lord Paramount, the commander of the 8th Army, and naturally included a large amount of praise for Yuffie. Looking at the quietness of the battlefield described by Paramount, Melu couldn't help but gradually widen his eyes. Now, he understood what Ryan said. It turned out that the focus was not on the news announced by His Majesty, but on the forbidden spell of Lord Earl O'Brien. At this time, he noticed that Ryan was still talking to him. Melu, we have established Lord Earl O'Brien's Imperial Capital Support Group. Lord Earl O'Brien will be our rival. I guess you won't join in, right? Ryan just said this. Melu jumped 3 feet high. Of course, I will also become a supporter of Lord Earl O'Brien. These descendants of nobles generally pay more attention to their noble status, so they did not call you Fairy Master Mage. The gathering of these descendants of nobles is just a microcosm On the second day after the great victory in Xyrex City, under the official propaganda of the Holy Lion Empire, not only the residents in the Holy Lion Empire knew about this exciting news and regarded Euphony as a hero, but it even spread to various places in the human world. Like now, Paramount is a little distressed. Outside the east gate of Xyrex City, a large group of people who looked like refugees with their families were shouting to enter the city. After receiving the report, Paramount hurried here, but unexpectedly heard these refugees shouting to go home. After asking, he learned that these refugees outside the city gate were people from the Falling Moon Kingdom who had evacuated from Xyrex City before. Most of the residents of Xyrex City have evacuated far away, and some have even been resettled in their own country by the Holy Lion Empire. But these more homesick residents have been living temporarily in a small town east of Xyrex City, with the idea of returning, if Xyrex City can be defended, and even ignoring the dangers that may be encountered if they evacuate too far. The Holy Lion Empire spent a lot of effort to publicize the great victory of Xyrex City, and various magic messages flew to various places to spread the news. The Kingdom of Falling Moon also learned about this not long ago, and the former residents of Xyrex City also learned that Xyrex City was indeed defended. Therefore, they rushed back immediately. But Paramount, who understood the cause and effect, still did not dare to let these refugees in. It stands to reason that Xyrex City has now become a completely military-controlled city, and ordinary residents cannot exist. But these refugees are people from Xyrex City, and it is not a good idea to stop them from going home. Just when Paramount was extremely entangled and didn't know whether to let these refugees into the city, a voice appeared. "Paramount, what's going on?" Hearing this voice, Paramount was overjoyed, and then a respectful look appeared on his face again. Turning around, he found that it was Euphony who came to the top of the city as expected. Then, he explained the situation here to Euphony. Please vote for recommendation. Chapter 582 Great Fame. In fact, Euphony, who had been using his spiritual power to cover Xyrex City, already knew what was going on at the city gate. However, it would be a bit unreasonable to deal with it without asking directly, so he asked Paramount more. Paramount gave Euphony a complete account of the situation that would soon occur, and at the end, asked Euphony what to do next. Euphony was also a little surprised. Although he knew that the refugees at the gate were the original residents of Xyrex City and wanted to come back now, he didn't know why the refugees came back. When Paramount carefully told Euphony the cause and effect, he realized that the great victory in Xyrex City had almost spread throughout the human world. Taking a newspaper that Paramount got from the refugees, Euphony looked at the long praise for himself on it and couldn't help blushing. But thinking again, if it weren't for him, the human race would have suffered a disastrous defeat in the battle in Xyrex City. So Euphony accepted this praise with peace of mind and became elated. With that, Euphony couldn't help but accept Paramount's request to appease the refugees who wanted to enter the city. After Euphony agreed to the request to appease the refugees, Paramount was the first to breathe a sigh of relief, and then he mustered up his fighting spirit and shouted to the city. Listen, everyone in the Kingdom of Falling Moon. I'm Paramount, the commander of the 8th Army of the Holy Lion Empire. Unfortunately, although I really want everyone to return to Xyrex City, I don't have the power to do so, because the Empire has not yet lifted the complete military control of Xyrex City. Hearing this, the refugees under the city were already excited. Seeing this, Paramount could only finish his words in a hurry. Don't panic, everyone. Although I don't have the power, there is still Lord O'Brien in the city, that is, the Grand Mage who brought victory to the Battle of Xyrex City. Now, I will ask the Grand Mage to make a decision. Next, Paramount stepped back 2 steps and asked Euphony to come forward to speak. Euphony was a little depressed when he heard Paramount's speech. It turns out that this guy wanted to take the responsibility of letting the refugees into the city, but he himself was afraid of offending the high-ranking officials of the Holy Lion Empire. However, Euphony was not afraid of offending the people of the Holy Lion Empire. Before, the Night Elves had already attacked the capital of the Holy Lion Empire, and the orb on the crown of the Holy Emperor was taken away by the Night Elves. In terms of offending the high-ranking officials of the Holy Lion Empire, who could be more ruthless than him? As the saying goes, Too many lies do not itch, and too many debts do not worry. Although the Holy Lion Empire did not know that Yu Fei was the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire, Yu Fei did not care about continuing to offend. Therefore, when he stepped forward, he had already decided to let these refugees outside the city of Zurich in. Anyway, the Orcs would probably not invade Zurich City again in the short term, and it would be safe here. After hearing what Paramount said, the refugees of the Falling Moon Kingdom under the city all quieted down. When Yu Fei slowly floated into the air, these refugees knelt down one after another, making Yu Fei stare wide-eyed. What do they mean? Yu Fei checked himself, and found that he was still wearing a black robe, and was hiding very deeply. There was no reason for these refugees to kneel down, just because he was too handsome. However, the refugees' subsequent shouts answered Yu Fei's doubts. Your Excellency the Great Mage, you are our benefactor. My Lord Earl, thank you for everything you have done for the Kingdom of Falling Moon. Such words of gratitude kept echoing outside the east gate of Zurich City, making Yu Fei understand that these refugees knelt down to express their respect and gratitude because they had saved the city of Zurich from being occupied by orcs. This made Yu Fei a little embarrassed because at the beginning he didn't actually think about spending much effort to help humans win. If it weren't for Grom's appearance and the final provocation, he would not have exposed his skill of tree realm descent. Now these refugees from the Kingdom of Falling Moon regard him as a hero, and he feels guilty. So Yu Fei hurriedly said some empty words, and then let the refugees enter the city directly. Even though he regarded the people of the S-Laser world as aliens, he still felt a little overwhelmed by the sight of so many living humans kneeling there to thank him. Paramount naturally had no objection to Yu Fei's agreement to let the refugees enter the city, because he actually wanted to do so. The refugees naturally remembered this favor on Yu Fei's head, and they were even more grateful to Yu Fei. After these refugees from the Falling Moon Kingdom entered the city, Yu Fei began to secretly eavesdrop on the refugees' conversations, wanting to know what the current situation was in the human countries, how the human countries now viewed the great victory of Zurich City, and what kind of image he had. After eavesdropping for a while, Yu Fei truly knew his current status in the human countries. The powerful skill of the Tree Realm's advent, which can affect a major battle or even a war, was recognized by humans as a forbidden spell passed down from ancient times. Yu Fei's strength was also recognized as epic, and his true ability may have reached the legendary mythical level. As for Yu Fei, the feelings of the upper class of mankind may be a little complicated, but the nobles and people in the middle and lower classes all regard Yu Fei as a hero of mankind. Many organizations similar to fan clubs have appeared in the Holy Lion Empire. They clearly call Yu Fei an idol, and the Empire has acquiesced to this idolization. As for the people of the Kingdom of Falling Moon, their gratitude to Yu Fei is even deeper. Although Yu Fei is not from the Kingdom of Falling Moon, but a noble of the Holy Lion Empire, this does not prevent the people of the Kingdom of Falling Moon from admiring him. After all, the territory of the Holy Lion Empire has not been really occupied by the Orcs, but the Kingdom of Falling Moon has already abandoned the second largest city in the country, Zurich City. The severity of the situation can be imagined. In this context, Yu Fei's move to turn the tide is particularly shocking. To put it in a broader sense, Yu Fei not only reversed the situation of the Battle of Zurich City, but also reversed the national destiny of the Kingdom of Falling Moon. Therefore, almost all the royal family and ordinary people in the Kingdom of Falling Moon have become fans of Yu Fei. Well, it turns out that I have such a great reputation. Yu Fei was somewhat speechless. His undercover work was quite good. Although he did not become the leader of the undercover organization like Illidan, he also became a national hero of mankind. The Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire became a national hero of mankind. This was really ridiculous. Ahem. The first bird to stick its head out gets shot. Will it bring any hidden dangers to me being promoted as a national hero of mankind? Yu Fei's heart was now full of mixed emotions, and he didn't know how to vent them. Speaking of which, the native humans of S-Lays were somewhat similar to the people on Earth, except that there were no Chinese people with black hair and yellow skin. The feeling of being recognized, and even respected by a large number of humans did make Yu Fei feel a little excited. But he also knew that humans would eventually be the enemy of the Night Elves, and the relationship between them would be a conqueror and the conquered. In this case, the respect of a large number of ordinary humans would be a psychological burden for him. In the future, if I, a national hero of mankind, raised my butcher knife against humans, how would these people look at me? Yufei didn't know, and didn't want to think about it anymore. Anyway, the human side doesn't know his identity yet, so we should take it one step at a time. No one knows Yufei's entanglement, but his reputation has spread throughout the human world and even the Slays continent. The forbidden spell of the advent of the tree world is also known as the strongest war magic in the history of Slays. Of course, it is limited to war. After all, the lethality of this skill is not too strong. In addition to the respect of humans, the great reputation brought Yufei also the resentment of the Orcs. After Grom returned to the human territory occupied by the Orcs, he quickly informed the Orcs of Yufei's strength and the situation in Zurich City. The Orcs, who have always been unstoppable when facing human countries, have suffered a huge blow this time. The demise of 300,000 troops is still a painful blow even for a large number of Orcs. Chapter 583 Duke O'Brien. Grom's announcement quickly attracted the attention of the Orcs. Although the Orcs did not plant spies in human countries, because they could be easily recognized by their appearance, there would always be spies in any world. Yufei's reputation in the human country was soon known to the Orcs. This time, Yufei became a thorn in the eyes of the Orcs. The title of human national hero was based on the corpses of 300,000 Orcs. For the Orcs, Yufei was the executioner, although they did more when treating humans. Naturally, the Orcs also came up with the idea of killing Yufei, the national hero of mankind, and completely destroying the fighting spirit of mankind. However, Yufei's strength was too strong. Even Grom, who was one of the strongest among the new Orcs, could not get any benefits from Yufei. Therefore, this matter still needed to be considered for a long time, and was temporarily suppressed by the Orcs. Yufei naturally didn't know what the Orcs were thinking. He was now in a happy distress. If possible, Yufei really didn't want to let the refugees from the Falling Moon Kingdom in at that time. Because this group of refugees was like a trigger, other residents in Zurich City also came back and asked to return to their homes. Since the first batch of refugees was allowed in, it was naturally difficult to refuse the subsequent refugees. So, in just 2 or 3 days, Zurich City became bustling and no longer solemn as before, when it was completely under military control. Although Grom's blade storm caused a lot of damage to the city, Grom was mainly targeting several wizard towers in the city at that time. The destroyed houses were just incidental during the operation, and not many were destroyed. Those few houses were quickly rebuilt in the hands of the enthusiastic residents of Zurich City after returning to their hometown. Even Paramount commanded a part of the troops and participated in the reconstruction. However, the name used was naturally the Order of Lord Earl O'Brien, because it would be a violation of military discipline to let the army do such things privately. Paramount was kind-hearted, and this kind of thing would make Yufei's popularity even higher. However, this brought some trouble to Yufei. Don't get me wrong, it's troublesome, but it's actually not a bad thing. It was just that where Yufei lived, the residents of Zurich City always came in an endless stream to admire Yufei in a black robe and express their heartfelt gratitude and high respect. If there were only 1 or 2 such people, Yufei would be happy. If there were 5 or 6, he would also feel happy and proud. But every day, hundreds of people would come in groups of 3 or 5 or gather together to do this, which really made Yufei a little annoyed. Fortunately, 3 days later, Zurich City received an order from the Holy Lion Empire, which freed Yufei. The order from the Empire was to let Paramount lead his 8th army to continue to garrison Zurich City to prevent the Orcs from continuing to attack from here. The Kingdom of Falling Moon was a vassal kingdom of the Holy Lion Empire, and it was also a barrier for the Empire when facing the Orcs attack, so a large number of troops were placed here. As for the new 4th army, it was ordered to return to the Holy Imperial capital with Yufei and escort the less than 30,000 Orc prisoners at the same time. Paramount was only the commander of the 8th army, and it was obviously impossible for him to control 2 legions for a long time. Yufei, who was bombarded with words of gratitude from the residents of Zurich City, received this magical message with great joy and immediately set off with the new 4th army. It is worth mentioning that he is now the temporary leader of the new 4th army. After all, an army cannot survive without a leader. Compared with the speed of Yufei riding the holy giant wolf, the speed of the new 4th army returning to the holy imperial capital was much slower. Especially since they were escorting more than 20,000 orc captives, they would be surrounded by onlookers wherever they passed. Fortunately, the kingdom of Falling Moon was adjacent to the Holy Lion Empire, and the new 4th army returned to Nanshengwen 10 days later. At the beginning, the Night Elves entered from Zishengwen outside the Holy Imperial capital, but Yufei had never seen Nanshengwen. When passing by Nanshengwen, Yufei also deliberately observed whether there was also the space transfer array that Zishengwen had at that time. However, it may only be Zishengwen that has that thing, and Yufei did not see it in Nanshengwen. It was obviously impossible for more than 20,000 orc captives and the new 4th army of more than 100,000 to enter the Holy Imperial capital directly. They were temporarily placed in the area within the 4 sacred passes and outside the Imperial capital. It is said that the Holy Lion Empire will hold a captive surrender ceremony in the Imperial capital, and high-level officials from other human countries will come to watch the ceremony. It turns out that this alien country also engages in face-saving projects. When Yufei received this notice, this was the first thought that popped into his mind. However, this had nothing to do with Yufei, so he rested in a manner arranged for him with peace of mind, waiting for the so-called captive surrender day to come. The Holy Lion Empire did not let Yufei wait for long. On the 3rd day, after he and the new 4th army returned to the outside of the Holy Imperial capital, it was the captive surrender day. Under the guidance of the reception officials arranged by the Holy Lion Empire, Yufei and some of the remaining officers of the new 4th army symbolically brought dozens of orcs to the south gate of the Holy Imperial capital. There are now crowds of people here. Almost half of the residents of the Holy Imperial city came here to see what the orcs who brought great crisis to humans look like, and to see what Yufei, who has been called the strongest magician of mankind, looks like. Before Yufei approached the south gate, he heard waves of voices. Listening carefully, most of these voices were actually calling for Earl O'Brien or Grand Major Brian, which made Yufei a little stunned. Although he knew that he should have a high reputation among humans, he did not expect that most of the spectators in this captive offering ceremony would call his name. This scene of fans lining the streets to welcome him gave him the feeling of a celebrity on tour. However, no one could see Yufei's expression under the cover of the hood, so in the eyes of the residents of the Holy Imperial City who participated in the captive offering ceremony, Grand Major Brian, who was walking in the front in a black robe, was still walking forward slowly amid the cheers of everyone, looking quite powerful. A large open space was cleared in front of the city gate. The residents of the Imperial capital who were visiting the captive offering ceremony were excluded from this open space. The Holy Emperor and the high-ranking officials of other human countries were waiting here. Yufei was surprised when he saw the Holy Emperor from afar. He didn't expect that this guy would come to greet him in person. It seemed that this guy valued him very much. Forgive Yufei for always calling the Emperor of the largest human empire this guy. When the Night Elves attacked the Holy Imperial capital, they trampled on the dignity of the Holy Emperor. Yufei really couldn't have even a little respect for the Holy Emperor. Besides, to be precise, the Holy Emperor was still the enemy of the Night Elves, so there was no need to care about the title. As Yufei moved forward, the cheers of the people became louder and louder. It was not until the Holy Emperor took a few steps forward to greet Yufei with a smile on his face that the onlookers stopped cheering and waited to see what His Majesty the Emperor had to say. The Holy Emperor did not first care about the officers of the new 4th army and the orc captives they brought with them, but first faced Yufei. This was a gesture indicating that the Holy Emperor valued Yufei, a strong man who could bring more orc captives, more than the orc captives. Earl O'Brien, you have made great contributions to the Empire, and are a hero of mankind. In recognition of your contribution, I have decided to grant you the title of Duke. From now on, you are the Duke of O'Brien. To Yufei's surprise, the Holy Emperor actually said this directly, and granted him the title of Duke. This is the highest level among the nobles. Above that is a so-called Grand Duke, but this is generally a title for the Grand Dukes of those principalities and the heads of the Saint-Chilled family. In essence, it is just a title of Duke. Chapter 584, A Miraculous Turn. The people in the imperial capital who were watching the ceremony all cried out in surprise when they heard the Holy Emperor announce that Yufei would be promoted directly from Earl to Duke. However, the high-level officials from other human countries who came to watch the ceremony in the open space did not show any surprise. It was obvious that they had communicated with each other before. This was also reflected in the behavior of the high-level officials of other human countries afterwards. After the Holy Emperor, another big man came forward, the current Emperor of the Botswana Empire, Botswana 42nd. When Yufei learned the identity of the fat man in front of him, he couldn't help but widen his eyes. Aren't the Holy Lion Empire and the Botswana Empire old enemies? How come Botswana 42nd was in the Holy Imperial capital? Before Yufei could figure it out, Botswana 42nd announced that Yufei would become the honorary Marquis of the Botswana Empire. After him, the current Emperor of the Cannon Empire also appeared and awarded Yufei the title of honorary Marquis of the Cannon Empire. Obviously, these three empires had discussed it. However, because Yufei originally appeared in the Holy Lion Empire, the other two empires did not overstep their authority and only gave Yufei the title of honorary Marquis instead of Duke. Yufei was still shocked that the emperors of the three major empires of mankind had gathered together like this when he heard what the Holy Emperor was announcing loudly. The Orcs have become extremely brutal now and will be the enemy of the entire SLAs. And we humans have a strong man like Grand Mage O'Brien, who has eliminated 300,000 orcs for us. This is a blessing for the human race and the continent of SLAs. The Holy Emperor looked around with awe-inspiring momentum, and then continued to speak slowly. Today, taking the opportunity to welcome Grand Mage O'Brien, the emperors and kings of our human countries have gathered together. In addition to conferring the title of Grand Mage O'Brien, another thing is to be announced. This matter concerns every human country and even every human being facing the destruction that will be brought by the brutal orcs. We humans have decided to unite together. We did so before, but there was no definite name after all. The emperors of the Botswana Empire and the Cannon Empire also stood on both sides of the Holy Emperor, announcing that what the Holy Emperor was going to announce next was their joint decision. As for the kings of other human kingdoms present, they naturally did not have the qualifications to be on par with the three emperors, so they all stood behind them. The Holy Emperor spoke solemnly. Humanity has been divided for too long, and internal friction is serious. Even when facing the orcs driven to the west of the Warcraft mountains by our ancestors, they were defeated step by step. But starting today, all this will change. Humanity will temporarily eliminate the concept of the country, and we will form a unified alliance, the Holy Alliance. As for the enemy of the Holy Alliance, there is no doubt that it is the orcs. As long as our human race is united, there is no enemy that cannot be defeated. What our ancestors can do, we can do as well, and even do better. The voice of the Holy Emperor became passionate, and he even stopped calling himself I, because of his excitement. I believe that with everyone's efforts, we can not only defeat the orcs, but also destroy this cruel and evil race. Yufei didn't care about what the Holy Emperor said next at this time, because he knew that it was nothing more than some empty and exciting words. When he found that the emperors of the three major empires of mankind had gathered in front of him, and there were also many kings of other human kingdoms here, an absurd idea came to his mind. I remember that, when Yufei was reading online novels on Earth before, he often saw a plot. When the protagonists in novels see important people from some countries or organizations gathering together for a meeting, they often have such psychological activities, as if a nuclear bomb drops at this time, 20th country, organization, should be paralyzed. Of course, in those novels, this is often just a psychological activity to make up the word count. Now Yufei saw that the emperors and kings of various human countries gathered outside the Holy Imperial capital, and he also had such psychological activities. However, unlike the protagonists in the novels he read, who were just psychological activities, Yufei was now trembling all over, thinking about the possibility of his own ideas. If all these human emperors and kings were killed here, could the Night Elves directly march in and easily take all their human territory? Yufei unscrupulously released his mental power to scan the surroundings. After the main body was upgraded to the level of the Eternal Tree, the mental power of the Elf King's clone naturally had a qualitative change. If he wanted to hide, then unless there was a mythical strongman within the scanning range, it would be impossible for anyone to discover his mental scan. After scanning, Yufei was very calm. Although there are many strong men in the Holy Imperial City now, there are only 5 epic level ones. There were originally mythical strong men, but they were killed in the last invasion of the Night Elves. And the 5 epic level strong men are now in the Imperial City. They must think that the leaders of the human countries will not be in danger so close. Besides, there is Yufei, a strong man who is already known as the first magician of mankind, outside the city. Even if there is danger, there is this person to bear it, so naturally there is no need for those epic level strong men to worry. As for the possible danger brought by Yufei, they did not consider it at all. How could a national hero of mankind hurt the leaders of human countries? Unfortunately, this time the humans were really arrogant. Everyone thought that Yufei was a human, a national hero of the human race, but no one thought that Yufei was actually the emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. Even when the Holy Emperor saw Yufei's black robe, he did not show dissatisfaction as Yufei imagined, thinking that it was just a quirk of the strong, and did not ask Yufei to show his face. The Holy Emperor was still speaking passionately, not knowing that the heroes behind these emperors and kings had already had dangerous ideas. And what he was talking about now happened to be the part related to Yufei. In the Holy Alliance, there will also be the Arcane Alliance. The Orcs are afraid of magic, so the magicians of our human countries will also unite to form the Arcane Alliance. As for the leader of the Arcane Alliance, there is no doubt that it is the strongest magician of our human beings today, Grand Mage O'Brien. Here, I will also grant Duke O'Brien the title of Holy Grand Mage, and make him the national teacher of my Holy Lion Empire. Then, the Holy Emperor applauded, and turned around with other emperors and kings to greet Yufei. It was difficult for him, as the head of a country, he almost never applauded. The onlookers were naturally very supportive of the news announced by the Holy Emperor, and Yufei becoming the national teacher of the empire also brought them a lot of security, so everyone's emotions were mobilized, and there was a wave of applause for a while. National teacher? Well, remember that in novels, the national masters are often those who spread rumors, and deceive the people, and destroy the country, right? Doesn't this echo my own thoughts? But I don't have the ability to spread rumors and deceive the people. I can only be indifferent to life and death and fight if I don't obey. The Holy Emperor was smiling, waiting for Yufei to come forward to accept his conferment. In his opinion, in such a grand occasion, he relied on the righteousness to directly win over Yufei, and no one could say anything. The ancestor Nicholas the Great died at the hands of those hateful Night Elves, but if he won over a magician who was no less powerful than the mythical level, he could also make up for the loss and restore the national prestige of the Holy Lion Empire. It's a pity that the ideal is beautiful, but the reality is cruel. The Holy Emperor has always been worried that other emperors or the Saint Chilled family would prevent him from winning over Yufei, and he even didn't let the Saint Chilled family participate in this captive offering ceremony. But what he didn't consider was whether Yufei would accept his winning over. Indeed, now that the Holy Emperor has grasped the righteousness, Yufei seems to have no choice but to agree. But this righteousness is only the righteousness of the human race. Facing Yufei, who is not a human being, the righteousness of the human race has no deterrent power at all. Chapter 585, A Miraculous Turn. Outside the Holy Imperial capital, everyone was looking at Yufei expectantly. Whether it was the emperors and kings of various human countries or the ordinary people of the Imperial capital, they all felt without a doubt that Yufei would definitely agree to the Holy Emperor's request. Because this was a matter of course, since Lord Duke O'Brien was able to participate in the war, and released the forbidden spell to kill 300,000 orcs, he must want to contribute to humanity and resist alien invasions. And becoming the leader of the Arcane Alliance will undoubtedly maximize his contribution. And according to ordinary people's thinking, there will definitely be no magician who would not be tempted by the identity of the leader of all human magicians. And the position of the national teacher of the Holy Lion Empire is also extremely tempting. After defeating the Orcs, if nothing unexpected happens, the Holy Alliance and the Arcane Alliance should be disbanded, so the identity of the leader of the Arcane Alliance is actually just a temporary identity. But the identity of the national teacher of the Holy Lion Empire is permanent, and it is a position above one person and 10,000 people. If Yufei was a normal person, he would never refuse. This is what everyone present thought. It's a pity that, although Yufei has a normal mind, he is not a human. Therefore, under the gaze of many people, Yufei chose to refuse without any pressure. I'm sorry, I can't accept your request. Yufei's tone seemed extremely humble, but the meaning conveyed in his words was an undoubted refusal and a faint sense of pride. This can be seen from the fact that he directly called the Holy Emperor you instead of your majesty. Suddenly, there was a state of shock outside the imperial capital, and everyone couldn't believe their ears. Rejected. Rejected. The faint smile on the face of the Holy Emperor also solidified. He didn't expect Yufei to refuse such a favorable request for him. And Yufei's words continued. Maybe everyone has made a mistake. It's true that I released the forbidden spell and killed nearly 300,000 orcs, but this doesn't make me a hero of the human race. A sense of hope rose in everyone's heart. It turned out that Duke O'Brien wanted to be humble. This seemed to be a convention. Isn't there a saying that says you should refuse once, twice, and 3 times? But soon, Yufei wiped out this glimmer of hope in the hearts of the people present. Besides, I don't seem to have expressed my willingness to accept the title of Duke O'Brien. What does the so-called Holy Alliance, the so-called Arcane Alliance, and the so-called Holy Lion Empire's National Master have to do with me? Do any of you know my true identity? Yufei said these words without pause, not caring about the shocking part in them. And the implicit meaning of his words also made the people present shudder. True identity? Duke O'Brien. No, he has already made it clear that he has not accepted the title of Duke. So what is the true identity of this great wizard? So, you humans are still too self-righteous. Yufei sighed, and then gently took off the hood on his head. For a moment, the people outside the imperial capital widened their eyes. No one did not want to see the true face of this powerful man who already had the title of the strongest magician. And the first thing that appeared in front of everyone was a pair of long pointed ears. Considering what Yufei said before, you humans, the people present, understood that the person they called a national hero was probably not a human. They had a huge misunderstanding from the beginning. The long pointed ears naturally belonged to the elves. Yufei's face did not surprise everyone. He really looked like an elf. But what surprised them was Yufei's next extremely domineering declaration. No one is qualified to assign me an identity, including you, the so-called Holy Emperor. Yufei looked at the Holy Emperor, whose face was becoming extremely wonderful, with a contemptuous look. Because you were trampled underfoot by my army. Yufei read this sentence in an aria, as if he was telling an epic. But the meaning contained in the words made the Holy Emperor's face change again, and his trembling face showed a look of shock and fear. You, are you? The Holy Emperor pointed at Yufei, who finally revealed his true face, and trembled and was speechless. Yufei looked at the Holy Emperor like this, and felt some pity in his heart. The Emperor of the largest human empire was actually beaten by the Night Elves. It was really pitiful. This could not be blamed on the poor psychological quality of the Holy Emperor. Nicholas the Great, as the ultimate trump card of the Holy Lion Empire, had almost become the sustenance in the hearts of every emperor of the Holy Lion Empire. However, such a powerful person who could be called a believer was beaten to death by the Night Elves in front of the Holy Emperor. The shock he brought to him was imaginable. Now when he was full of confidence and wanted to establish the Holy Alliance, re-establish the majesty of the Holy Lion Empire, and win over the newly emerged strongmen, to become the new trump card of the Holy Lion Empire. However, at this critical moment, the strongman showed that he had a relationship with the Night Elves, and it was even possible that this made the Holy Emperor feel terrified. Yufei took over the words of the Holy Emperor and directly stated his identity. My name is Alan Abner. I have been famous for a long time, right? After announcing his identity, Yufei looked at the human kings with confidence. But what happened next made him speechless. Who is Alan Abner? Is he famous? Yeah, how come I don't know this elf? His Majesty the Holy Emperor should know. Let's see what he says. Damn it. Are these human kings courting death? How dare they not know my name? What Yufei announced was, of course, the name that his elf king clone had established when he was created, that is, the name of the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. But what he didn't expect was that the kings of these human countries didn't know his name. Well, you have one more way to die. Yufei could only say this hatefully in his heart. However, the Holy Emperor eventually recovered from his trembling look and slowly revealed the so-called identity of Alan Abner. I didn't expect that you would actually participate in the war between our human race and the Orcs, the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. As soon as these words came out, there was an uproar. Han Chen has his birthday today, so I'll take a day off to update this chapter, and I'll try to make up for it tomorrow. Chapter 586, A Sudden Turn. What? Is this true? After the Holy Emperor said that, everyone on the scene, from the Emperor and King to the ordinary residents of the Holy Imperial Capital, all had this reaction. Among them, the people of the Holy Lion Empire reacted particularly strongly. The Dark Knight Empire can be regarded as a taboo topic in the Holy Lion Empire, all because of the invasion 2 years ago. Although the specific situation that happened in the palace at that time was unknown to the general public except the Holy Emperor, it is a fact that the capital of their country was conquered by another country. The Holy Lion Empire claims to be the orthodox inheritance of the ancient Holy Empire, and the people still have a strong sense of national honor. After the Dark Knight Empire conquered the capital, the people of the Holy Lion Empire felt hot on their faces for a long time, and they also hid resentment towards the Dark Knight Empire in their hearts. As for the emperors and kings of other human countries, they were more surprised by Yufei's identity as the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. Among the 3 major empires, the Cannon Empire also had some friction with the Dark Knight Empire at the beginning, but it was not too serious. As for the Botswana Empire, it was a gloating attitude towards the fate of the Holy Lion Empire at that time, and had no intersection with the Dark Knight Empire. The other 2 emperors of the empire did not react as violently as the Holy Emperor, but they also looked at Yufei, who had revealed his true face, with a look of surprise and vigilance. As for the kings of the human kingdoms, perhaps because the Dark Knight Empire was too famous, there was a lot of fear in their eyes besides surprise. This fear was not only because the Dark Knight Empire was able to break the capital of the Holy Lion Empire, which showed its strength. More importantly, it was because of the powerful strength shown by Yufei, the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. Generally speaking, for their own safety, people with higher status in S-Laser generally have stronger strength. The rulers of human countries are naturally no exception, and their own strength is not weak. There are even some kingdoms that stipulate that if the prince's strength does not reach a certain level, he cannot inherit the throne. But these emperors and kings who are not weak now do not even have a sense of security in front of Yufei. This is a peerless strong man who can kill nearly 300,000 orcs with a forbidden spell. When everyone thought Yufei was a human, he was even given the title of the strongest magician of mankind. If Yufei was really a human, then everyone would feel extremely recognized and proud. However, now his identity has undergone a magical transformation, becoming the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire, which makes the humans present somewhat hostile. It was still the Holy Emperor who came forward to communicate with Yufei. After all, the Holy Lion Empire and the Dark Knight Empire had the most intersections, although those were not some good memories. Your Majesty Abner, although I don't know why you ran to my Holy Lion Empire to be a small earl, it is true that you assisted our army in killing nearly 300,000 orcs, which makes us humans feel extremely grateful. The Holy Emperor's words seemed to be a compliment, but they were actually a criticism. The first sentence ridiculed Yufei as the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire, and ran to the Holy Lion Empire to be an earl, which was really embarrassing. The following words turned Yufei's release of the Tree Realm to kill a large number of orcs by himself into assisting the human army in killing, which was erasing Yufei's achievements. If the previous sentence was still the Holy Emperor's uncontrollable sarcasm, then the next words he said became a little humble. Since His Majesty Abner has done such a great thing, it must be because he is angry about the orcs' recklessness. After all, if the orcs destroy us humans, then the next race should be the other races, including your Night Elves, of course. The Holy Emperor kept using you in his words. On the surface, this attitude made number 4 unable to find fault. Yufei was secretly amazed in his heart. He didn't expect that the Holy Emperor was so patient. he could show such an attitude in front of himself, the emperor of the empire who had trampled on his dignity? He was indeed a good politician. The Holy Emperor naturally didn't know what Yufei was thinking, and he continued to speak. The Orcs can be said to be the public enemy of all races in Slays now, and His Majesty Abner should have participated in the war between us humans and Orcs for this reason. In this case, for the peace of Slays, would His Majesty Abner be willing to join the Holy Alliance and let the Dark Knight Empire also contribute to the action against the Orcs? The Holy Emperor also added at the end, if His Majesty Abner is willing to join the Holy Alliance on behalf of the Dark Knight Empire, I'm willing to support His Majesty to become the leader of the Holy Alliance. Emma, is this giving me a general? The more Yufei listened, the more he felt something was wrong. In the end, from the Holy Emperor's additional words, Yufei finally saw what this guy's purpose was. The Holy Emperor thought Yufei was easy to fool. When he thought Yufei was a human, he wanted to use the righteousness of the human race to pressure Yufei, so that he would accept the two identities of the leader of the Arcane Alliance and the national teacher of the Adrenaline Empire, and contribute to humans and the Adrenaline Empire. Now that he saw that the situation was not right, the Holy Emperor actually started to use the excuse of the peace of Slays to pressure Yufei. Somehow, Yufei suddenly felt a sense of deja vu about this scene. Thinking carefully, isn't this the rhetoric that the Dark Knight Empire used to question the human countries after it got the Heart of Light? I remember that at that time, the Dark Knight Empire also used the phrase for the peace of Slays, and then used some means to make those human countries think that the Heart of Light was really used to seal the other world, thus exposing the Dark Knight Empire's surprise attack on the Holy Imperial capital. I just didn't expect that the Holy Emperor would use this phrase to squeeze Yufei now, which made Yufei feel a little bit of reaping what he had sown. Unfortunately, unlike the Holy Emperor, it was the Holy Lion Empire that suffered the loss at the time, and the Dark Knight Empire also made an explanation, because all the human countries united to put pressure on it at that time. If the Night Elves had the strength they have now, then what about robbing the crown jewels? If you don't accept it, you also robbed your Holy Emperor's wife. What can I do? But now the Holy Emperor did not recognize the situation clearly, and actually used for the peace of Esras to pressure Yufei. Would Yufei care? Of course not. The strength of the Night Elves now can ignore this so-called righteousness, whether it is the human race or the entire Esras. Therefore, less than 5 seconds after the Holy Emperor said those words that he thought would definitely make Yufei compromise, Yufei made a tough reply. Ha 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 ha. Yufei laughed first, showing an extremely domineering and strong attitude. It is actually somewhat inconsistent with the status of the elves, if the race laughs so exaggeratedly, but somehow, the people present felt that Yufei's laughter made them feel very harmonious. For the peace of Esras. This sentence is well said. I naturally hope that Esras can become a peaceful paradise. Yufei said this first, as if he was going to compromise with the Holy Emperor. Not only the Holy Emperor, but also the faces of the other human country leaders present were happy. If His Majesty Abner is really willing to join the Holy Alliance, it would be a good thing. Apart from anything else, first of all, the safety of their noble emperors and kings can be guaranteed, instead of being in a state of fear after learning about Yufei's identity. As for what the Holy Emperor said about letting the Dark Knight Empire be the leader of the Holy Alliance, no one took it seriously. Even if the Dark Knight Empire is the leader, what will happen? The human countries will still communicate and act in unison in secret. The Dark Knight Empire can only have a false name. But then what Yufei said made their faces look ugly again. In fact, I think that peace is not just about forming an alliance. Think about it. Today the Orcs invade, and you human countries form an alliance to resist. Tomorrow if your human alliance attacks other races again, then other races may also unite to resist you. When will this back and forth end? The so-called peace is just a joke. Hearing this, the heads of the human countries present already had an ominous premonition. As for the people of the Holy Imperial capital, they were already confused by the successive twists and turns, and they didn't know what to do. Yufei finally revealed his purpose, so I think that the premise of peace is unification. It's not this kind of alliance nature, it's not an unstable unity. In my opinion, the Holy Alliance that you humans want to establish now is actually no different from a country. I'm Abner, the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. My lifelong wish is to bring true peace to S-Laser. So, can the human lords present make a contribution to the peace of S-Laser and merge into our Dark Knight Empire to achieve true unification so that S-Laser can be completely peaceful? The smile on Yufen's face, combined with his extremely delicate and beautiful face modulated by the Elder's altar, makes people feel like spring breeze. But the words he said made the human lords feel cold all over, and at the same time, they felt angry. You are wishful thinking. The Holy Emperor originally thought that he had heard it wrong. The Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire actually dared to speak so arrogantly and wanted the human race to merge into the Dark Knight Empire. But when he saw that the other emperors and kings around him also had expressions of disbelief and hidden anger, he was sure that he had not heard wrongly. So, the angry Holy Emperor was the first to tear his face off and bluntly scolded Yuffie for being wishful thinking. If nothing unexpected happens today, it should be the 4th day. I'm very tired and feel weak all over. Thanks to book friend Dear K for the reward of 100 Nyangbi and an update ticket. Thanks to book friend Mizuwu for the 2 update tickets. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 587, Killing Spree. You actually want my human race to submit to your Night Elves? Are you kidding me? Your Majesty Abner, although the Dark Knight Empire is strong, it cannot just look down on my entire human race. Perhaps the strength of our country alone cannot match that of the Dark Knight Empire, but can your mere Dark Knight Empire withstand the wrath of the entire human race? The Holy Emperor was extremely indignant and even spit out saliva, which ruined his image. People wondered if he wanted to drown Yuffie, a strong man who was suspected to have mythical strength, with his saliva. I respectfully call you His Majesty Abner, because of his contribution in helping us humans kill 300,000 orcs. But if your majesty is so disrespectful and violates the dignity of our human race, we can only regretfully announce that the Holy Alliance does not welcome the Dark Knight Empire. Your Majesty Abner should return to his own country as soon as possible. The Holy Emperor smiled contemptuously. Of course, if your majesty still wants the title of Duke of my Holy Lion Empire, the title previously conferred on your majesty is still valid. Your Majesty Abner can walk freely in the human world under the name of Duke O'Brien in the future. Is this being ridiculed? This is indeed being ridiculed. The Holy Emperor is now actually starting to talk about Yuffie's disguised identity, and all the words are permeated with disdain. The Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire and to the Adrenaline Empire to be an Earl, and was granted the title of Duke. This would definitely be a huge scandal, and for the Dark Knight Empire. But Yuffie didn't care about the Holy Emperor's ridicule at all. Is it necessary to care about the desperate wailing of a dying person? In Yuffie's eyes, the Holy Emperor was already a dead man. In response to the Holy Emperor's ridicule, Yuffie only replied with 2 words, haha. This made the Holy Emperor a little confused, because in the world of S-Laser, haha did not have so many meanings. In desperation, Yuffie had to continue to talk nonsense. Foolish and ignorant humans. Well, now I think that this sentence that the dragon race likes to say the most is actually quite reasonable. Are you stupid humans still using the intelligence of the past to measure the current strength of the Dark Knight Empire? Oh haha, even if I walk under the name of O'Brien again, you human kings and emperors will never see that scene again. Yuffie's eyes became extremely aggressive, sweeping across every human lord with different expressions. Every king and emperor who was swept by his eyes felt a deep chill. What does the Dark Knight Empire Emperor mean by this? Could it be that he is so crazy that he wants to kill us all here? Those human lords now finally know what the ominous premonition just now means. Speaking of which, I have to thank you, the so-called Holy Emperor. This title is disgusting. If you hadn't taken the lead in establishing a holy alliance, it would have been difficult for me to catch all the rulers of all of you human countries. I think I need to thank you. As he said this, Yuffie pretended to think seriously, and then he spoke, as if he had made a great decision. How about this? If you are willing to surrender to my Dark Knight Empire now, I cannot demote you to a slave, but grant you the status of a civilian. If you perform well, it is not impossible to promote you to a knight. Yufei said to the Holy Emperor very sincerely, especially the last sentence, which looked very difficult, as if giving the Holy Emperor a knight, a title that can only be regarded as a quasi-noble, was already a high regard for the Holy Emperor. Perhaps this is what is called a gentleman's revenge is not enough in one day. Ahem. Anyway, Yufei thinks so. He generally does not hold grudges, because he takes revenge on the spot. The Holy Emperor used Count O'Brien and the Duke to mock him, so he simply compared the Holy Emperor with the slaves and civilians of the Dark Knight Empire, and the degree of mockery was naturally higher. As expected, Yufei's words were simply a slap in the face of the Holy Emperor. The Holy Emperor immediately wanted to say something else, but unfortunately Yufei was no longer prepared to talk nonsense. Forget it, there is no need to say so much to a dying person. Get ready to welcome your predetermined fate. Yufei soared into the air, and without using any spells, countless green light spots appeared in the sky and slowly fell down. 10 days have passed, and even if the Tree Realm Advent is the ultimate skill, it has already cooled down. In order to safely catch all the human kings present, Yufei did not hesitate to let the Tree Realm Advent again. This skill, which has been called the strongest war forbidden spell in the history of SLAs, was released. In the past 10 days, the scene caused by Yufei's Tree Realm Advent skill naturally spread in the human world. The appearance of a large number of green light spots in the sky shocked everyone except Yufei. Will this legendary strongest forbidden war spell actually fall on their heads? Just an hour ago, all the human lords and residents of the Holy Imperial capital who were present still thought that Yufei would become the guardian of the human race, and the reputation of the Tree World's Advent would be passed down forever in the name of the magic of human civilization. But no one could have imagined that they would actually witness the power of this forbidden spell in person an hour later. The green light spots falling from the sky did not slow down because of the fear in the hearts of humans. They soon fell to the ground, and then countless seedlings sprouted from the ground. No, don't. A crazy onlooker seemed to be unable to bear the solemn atmosphere, shouting and stomping on the seedlings that had just formed on the ground. But how could the seedlings summoned by the Tree World's Advent be so easily destroyed? Even those human warriors who reacted could not cause any damage to even a single seedling. Before they completely turned into tree people, they were protected by the Tree World's Advent domain, and these seedlings were in a state of quasi-invincibility. When humans could cause harm, the tree people had already appeared. Outside the Holy Imperial City, a scene that was exactly the same as outside the city of Zurich appeared. More than 100,000 towering trees formed a huge forest, covering a large area of land outside the Holy Imperial City. In the tree world, Yufei was the master. Although this domain skill could only bring him a bonus on life recovery, and could not effectively improve Yufei's own strength, he could control every tree person in every place in the tree world and let them do what he wanted. Like now, Yufei ordered the tree people not to harm ordinary residents of the Holy Imperial City, mainly targeting emperors and kings of various human countries. In Yufei's view, ordinary humans will be part of the rule of the Night Elves in the future, so there is no need to kill them all now. But those emperors and kings are unstable factors, and they must be wiped out before they can feel at ease. Of course, the so-called not harming ordinary residents of the Holy Imperial City is based on the premise that they do not resist. If they take the initiative to attack the tree people will naturally not be polite. Speaking of which, there are indeed some residents of the Holy Imperial capital who are confident of their strength and actually started fighting with the tree people. However, such people are only short-lived and will soon be dealt with by the tree people. When most ordinary humans found that the tree people did not actively attack them, they stayed quietly in their own places and did not dare to make any unusual movements. In fact, even if these humans resisted together, Yufei would not underestimate them at all. At the beginning, 300,000 orcs were destroyed in the advent of the tree world. There are less than 300,000 ordinary humans whose strength is far from that of the orc army. What kind of waves can they make? Only those human kings and their guards can make a relatively effective resistance in the field of the advent of the tree world. especially the emperors of the three empires. The magic items for protection are endless, which is simply eye-opening for Yufei. The Holy Emperor is now wearing a blue shield. Under the coverage of Yufei's mental power, it is easy to find that this magic shield, which should be water-based, is emitted from a ring on the Holy Emperor's hand. On his fingers, there were 7 other rings of different shapes. Just now, the Holy Emperor had already pushed over a khaki shield, and with it, he managed to hold out for a while under the attacks of many ordinary tree people. But soon he was targeted by an ancient tree spirit, and the khaki shield was also shattered. 2 broken rings could be seen under the Holy Emperor's feet, one of which was the one that emitted the khaki shield. The other broken ring was the guarantee that the Holy Emperor could hold on and hold up the blue shield. Just now, by sacrificing this ring, the Holy Emperor sent out a very strong fire magic and actually burned the ancient tree spirit that was targeting him to ashes. It was because of the death of the ancient tree spirit that Yufei shifted his attention here. Looking at the 7 rings still on the Holy Emperor's hand, Yufei felt a little annoyed. If 2 rings could kill 1 ancient tree spirit, then the Holy Emperor could kill 5 ancient tree spirits. You should know that after the release of the tree realm, at most only 10 ancient tree spirits will appear at the same time. If the Holy Emperor can have so many powerful life-saving magic items, then the other 2 emperors should not be far behind. In this case, wouldn't the tree realm be helpless against these emperors? 1 emperor is equal to 5 ancient tree spirits, and 3 emperors are 15. This number is obviously not enough. Besides, even if the kings of those human kingdoms are not as rich as the 3 emperors, they should have some ability, which seems a bit difficult to deal with. Well, here in Yufei, the emperors of the 3 major human empires are actually equivalent to his summons. If the 3 emperors knew about this, they would definitely be so angry that they would vomit blood. Here is the 2nd chapter. Suddenly I feel that I can't update 4 chapters today. Hanchan, please do your best. Also, today is the day when the college entrance examination is over. I wish all the candidates can be admitted to their ideal universities. Chapter 588, A Massacre. Well, if we assume that 1 emperor equals 5 ancient tree spirits, then it seems that the tree realm advent is about 80% unable to do anything to these emperors. As for the other ancient tree spirits and ancient tree spirits, I'm afraid those kings can't deal with them. It seems that Yufei has to use other means. However, as the ultimate skill of the heroic profession of the Elf King, how could the tree realm advent have only this much power? It is true that only 10 ancient tree spirits can appear at the same time in the tree realm advent, but this does not mean that only 10 ancient tree spirits can appear in the domain before and after. Let's put it this way, within the tree realm advent domain, the number of tree spirits of different levels is constant at the same time. It can be understood that the tree realm advent is a system of officials, with 1 ancient tree spirit in every 100 ordinary tree spirits, 1 ancient tree spirit in every 1,000 ordinary tree spirits, 1 ancient tree spirit in every 10,000 ordinary tree spirits. This quota isn't changed, which is equivalent to 1 carrot and 1 pit in the officialdom. But if the original ancient, immemorial, and primeval tree spirits are killed, then under the effect of the tree world's advent, an ordinary tree spirit will be promoted to the missing position accordingly. It is equivalent to an official in a position in the officialdom stepping down, and then naturally there will be a new person to take over. Therefore, although the Holy Emperor had solved an ancient tree spirit before, after that, an ordinary tree spirit in a certain place in the tree world's advent suddenly had a powerful force infused into its body, and then it became a new ancient tree spirit. Within the tree world's advent, the number of ancient tree spirits is still 10. In other words, the magic items consumed by the Holy Emperor are completely wasted. However, the Holy Emperor does not know this. He is still complacent about solving a sky-level tree man. He thinks that Yufei's forbidden spell seems to be nothing special, and it may only shine on the battlefield. Of course, Yufei will not let the Holy Emperor be proud for too long. If only 1 human can be chosen to kill, then Yufei will definitely choose this Holy Emperor. This was not only because of the identity of the Holy Emperor, but also because the Holy Emperor had fanned the flames and united the human countries to cause a lot of trouble to the Dark Knight Empire, which made Yufei very unhappy. With a thought, Yufei began to mobilize the distribution of the ancient tree people in the tree world. Soon, the Holy Emperor found that the tree people around him seemed to be a little different from the original ones. If the Holy Emperor also had a god's perspective like Yuffie, then he would be able to see that with his position as the center of the circle, in a large circular area, all the tree people in the area had become ancient tree people. Under Yuffie's mobilization, 8 ancient tree spirits, 50 ancient tree spirits and 300 ancient tree spirits had surrounded the Holy Emperor layer by layer. As for Botswana 42nd and the Emperor of the Cannon Empire and the Kings of the Human Kingdom, they were temporarily restrained by the remaining ancient tree people. Anyway, there were enough tree people, and even if the ancient tree people were killed, other ordinary tree people could make up for it. It was definitely a wise choice to temporarily concentrate on killing the Holy Emperor. When the Holy Emperor saw several tree people around him, the kind that he had to use 2 magic rings to deal with before, he knew that Yuffie was definitely targeting him. The Holy Emperor knew that his actions within the range of the tree world should be clearly observed by Yuffie, and the sound should be the same. So, after discovering that he was targeted by Yuffie, and that he was set up to die, the Holy Emperor finally stopped maintaining his demeanor and shouted, "Abner, you wait for me. If you don't die this time, I will let you see why the Holy Lion Empire has always been the strongest empire of the human race, and you will pay the price for your actions." Yuffie curled his lips. He looked down on people who made such harsh words the most. If whoever made more and louder harsh words would win, then what's the point of improving strength? Besides, in this case, the Holy Emperor still made harsh words. Even if he didn't want to kill him at first, he would have to kill him now, right? I don't know what the Holy Emperor is thinking. But since he has made a statement, Yuffie naturally cannot help but respond. Just as the Holy Emperor thought, the Tree World Advent domain was completely controlled by Yuffie. No matter what the people inside did, or what he wanted them to hear, he could do it easily. For example, the harsh words that the Holy Emperor had said before were actually only heard by Yuffie. Even if the people in the Tree World Advent domain were close to the encirclement formed around the Holy Emperor, they could not hear the Holy Emperor shouting inside. "Haha, you actually have the leisure to threaten me? No, it's confidence. What gives you the confidence to threaten me? You know, your ancestor, that Nicholas the Great, was turned into ashes by my army 2 years ago. Could it be that you have another mythical level strongman under your command? Beast Emperor, what can you do?" Yuffie really felt that the title of Holy Emperor was too pretentious. Thinking of the name of the Holy Lion Empire, he simply equated the lion with the beast and called the Holy Emperor the Beast Emperor. And what he said was not just for the Holy Emperor alone, but everyone in the Tree World Advent domain heard it. And the information conveyed in Yuffie's words also shocked everyone who heard him. The name of Emperor Nicholas the Great is widely known. Perhaps ordinary humans have forgotten about him, but now in the area of the Tree Realm, either the ruler of a country or the residents of the Holy Imperial Capital, they all know about him. What they didn't expect was that Emperor Nicholas of the Holy Lion Empire had lived until 2 years ago, and he was a mythical supreme being. Botswana 42nd was thankful in his heart that, although the Botswana Empire and the Holy Lion Empire were sworn enemies, there had not been a large-scale war before. Otherwise, it would be bad to bring out this old antique. Of course, he doesn't have to worry about this now, because Yuffie has clearly pointed out that the mythical Emperor Nicholas the Great has also been killed by the Dark Knight Empire. No wonder the Holy Lion Empire had to encourage various human countries to unite and announce the Dark Knight Empire. No matter which country has such a trump card, and it is taken away, it will definitely be furious. After understanding these things, the human rulers in the Tree Realm were even more desperate. Since the strongest mythical beings could be killed by the Dark Knight Empire, what could these people do? For a while, many human kings with weak wills gave up resistance and were killed directly by the tree people. After hearing what Yuffie said, the Holy Emperor naturally gritted his teeth. But as Yuffie said, even if Yuffie now contemptuously called him the Beast Emperor, he could not do anything. The gap in strength was too huge, and the Holy Emperor suddenly became discouraged. Speaking of which, the 5 epic level strongmen in the Holy Imperial Capital were not unaware of the changes outside the Imperial Capital, but they did not dare to enter the area where the tree world descended, fearing that they would be in danger. They knew how many life-saving items the Holy Emperor had. With these epic level strongmen, the Holy Emperor could definitely hold on until the tree world disappeared. However, this judgment was based on the premise that Yu Fei did not target the Holy Emperor. When Yu Fei made up his mind to kill, even the gods could not stop him. The 8 ancient tree spirits attacked almost in a suicidal manner, and it took 4 of them to consume all the magic rings of the Holy Emperor. Lasers magic items can only be equipped with 6 at a time. If there are more, the magic items will affect each other, and even become unusable. The 10 rings worn by the Holy Emperor were specially made, so they could break through this conclusion. Unfortunately, it would be impossible to have more. Therefore, when all 10 rings were broken, the Holy Emperor was exposed to the tree people who surrounded him like a stripped lamb. Although the Holy Emperor himself has the strength of the sky level, he has almost no experience in battle. How can he be the opponent of a large number of vicious tree people? After some weak resistance, the Holy Emperor was forked by a branch of an ancient tree spirit, looking extremely desolate. I can't believe that I, the Emperor of the Holy Lion Empire, will die outside my own imperial capital today. The Holy Emperor only felt a blur in front of his eyes, and he was so sad that he couldn't help crying. Yu Fei was originally considering whether to spare the life of the Holy Emperor to hijack the Emperor's command over the country, but when he saw that the Holy Emperor was actually crying, he suddenly felt a chill and ordered the ancient tree spirit to tear the Holy Emperor to pieces. If the Holy Emperor knew that he was killed by Yu Fei because of his sorrow and tears, and Yu Fei had not yet made up his mind to kill him, he would definitely regret it to death. Well, it was a death anyway, so it would be more comfortable to be torn to pieces by the ancient tree spirit. The ancient tree spirit that tore the Holy Emperor to pieces was the new one formed after the first ancient tree spirit was killed by the Holy Emperor with the help of the magic ring. This ancient tree spirit was also a revenge for his predecessor. Since the Holy Emperor was determined to kill him, Yu Fei would no longer hesitate to consider whether to kill other human kings. Since he had decided to kill at the beginning, he should do it now. So, after the Holy Emperor, Botswana 42nd, the current Emperor of the Cannon Empire, and the kings of the human kingdoms were killed one by one under Yu Fei's orders. When the duration of the tree world's advent was about to end, this feast of killing came to an end. Aha, there is more hope for the 4th chapter. However, the number of words in the 4th chapter will be less. Everyone must forgive Hang Chen, =@_@=. Chapter 589, The Tragedy of the Human Race. After the tree world's advent domain disappeared for several minutes, the residents of the Holy Imperial City who were originally trapped in it still couldn't believe that they had survived the strongest war forbidden spell. Of course, they knew clearly that this was because the Dark Knight Empire Emperor mentioned by the Majesties showed mercy. By the way, what about the Majesties? Exclamation mark. The residents of the Holy Imperial City realized that they had successfully escaped from the tree world's advent domain, but the kings and emperors of the human countries had disappeared. The most important thing is that their own Holy Emperor was also missing. When everyone focused their attention on the open space where the Majesties were originally, everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of grief. Because now in that open space, a Jingwen appeared. What is Jingwen? To be precise, it is a small hill of corpses, a building formed after being sealed with soil. Of course, the Jingwen in general is actually a pile of human heads piled together. In war, building a Jingwen is a very deterrent act. Of course, Yu Fei would not specifically cut off the heads of those human kings and pile them up. The Jingwen outside the Holy Imperial City is actually very small, less than 1 meter high, but it is shining with golden light. Because this small Jingwen is made of the crowns and royal crowns of human rulers. But in the eyes of people who see this not so scary Jingwen, the Jingwen made of crowns is more chilling than the one made of corpses. Almost all the emperors and kings of human countries who still have a lot of territory have come to the Holy Imperial City to discuss the establishment of the Holy Alliance. Now, their crowns have all been taken off to build this small Jingwen, so the fate of the emperors and kings can be imagined. The residents of the Holy Imperial City who came out to participate in the so-called captive offering ceremony were all at a loss. Our emperor, no, the emperors and kings of all human countries, are gone just like that. Just like that, they were all solved by the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire alone. unable to suppress it. Many people associated this comparison with the comparison between the Dark Knight Empire and human countries. The Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire can kill all the emperors and kings of human beings by himself. So does it mean that the Dark Knight Empire can fight against all human countries with the power of one country? People don't know. Even the rulers of human countries don't know the true strength of the Dark Knight Empire and the Night Elves. How can ordinary humans know? But in their hearts, they have planted the idea that, even if all human countries unite, they may not be able to defeat the Dark Knight Empire. Uferi placed the Jingwan made of crowns outside the Holy Imperial capital, but he rode the Holy Giant Wolf and left here directly. Originally, Uferi was going to have a good time in the human world and understand and fight against the Orcs, but he himself did not expect that things would change in such a way. Now he can only go back to the Dark Knight Empire. The 5 epic masters in the Holy Imperial capital now have no mind and confidence to stop Uferi. Uferi's behavior and strength have brought them too much shock. These epic masters no longer have the courage to fight Uferi. Besides, even the Holy Emperor they serve is dead. What's the point of fighting Uferi to the death? Uferi knew that the entire Esla's continent would be in chaos next. I have been waiting for this day for a long time. Uferi's eyes were burning with fire. All human countries have no leaders. Even if they can each have a new emperor or king, there will be chaos for a long time. Then, this period of time is the time for the Night Elves to come out. If they don't take advantage of this opportunity they created to conquer the human world, it would be a waste of their time to catch all the human rulers in one fell swoop. As for the Orcs, the Blood Elves will temporarily contain them for a while. On the way back to the Dark Knight Empire, Uferi had already decided on the next strategy. The Night Elf troops began to mobilize one by one. The Blood Elves, who had originally made smaller moves, were also preparing to start wreaking havoc in the human territories that the Orcs had already occupied, and other Blood Elves hiding in the Warcraft mountains also began to move out in large numbers. Let's not talk about how Uferi arranged the Night Elves, but the human world was in chaos, just as Uferi thought. When the human countries received the news that their emperors and kings had died outside the Holy Imperial capital, their first reaction was that this was definitely a joke. Ordinary people would not know about the establishment of the Holy Alliance before the alliance was established, but the top leaders of various countries knew what the leaders of various human countries were doing in the Holy Imperial capital. This was a grand event attended by all human countries. How could there be any problems? Besides, didn't the strongest magician of the human race, Lord O'Brien, also come to the Holy Imperial capital? With this strong man in the city, how could the leaders of various countries die? Because of the above reasons, those who received the news refused to believe the authenticity of the news. However, after reading the content of the news carefully, most of the people who received the news collapsed to the ground. It turned out that it was Lord O'Brien who killed the leaders of various human countries. What Lord O'Brien? That's the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. The elves would actually do such a crazy thing. These people became at a loss, and no one expected that the human race, which was originally emitting vitality, and was about to unite to drive out the Orcs, and establish the hegemony of Eslaza, would suddenly suffer such a huge blow. Those who knew the news, but did not collapse to the ground were all princes from various human countries. After learning that the emperor and king of their country had died, their first thought was that they must sit on the coveted throne. In each human country, the princes began to fight openly, and everyone wanted to become the supreme ruler of their country. This was also the best situation that Uferi predicted. He even expected the chaos in human countries because of human nature. It was impossible to conceal such a big news that the rulers of various human countries had died. Soon, even the slaves with the lowest status knew this explosive news. Most humans, in addition to fear and disbelief, all fell into mourning. In feudal society, the death of the emperor and king was a big event, and generally everyone in the country had to wear white silk. Although there was no such rule in the human country of Eslaza, people's grief was definitely not less. The fourth update is completed. Although this chapter has few words, a total of more than 11,000 words have been updated today. I'm confidently asking for recommendation votes. Thank you book friends Ianglanguayu for the reward of 588 Nyangbi points. Chapter 590 Orcs Response. In each human country, those princes who want to compete for the throne naturally have to get the support of the nobles and the people. At this time, the best way to get the support of the nobles and the people is naturally to avenge the former king and show their filial piety. However, Euphenia's strength is too strong, and the Dark Knight Empire is not easy to mess with in the eyes of everyone. Therefore, most human countries did not directly list Euphenia and the Dark Knight Empire as enemies, and those princes could only act very sad to win sympathy and gain the support of the nobles and the people. In order to show their filial piety, many princes and princes even cried in the toilet. The princes and princes did this, naturally setting an example for the nobles and the people. When everyone is sad about the death of the former king, if you don't follow the trend, you will definitely be troubled by others. So soon, every human country was in mourning, and even those who were not sad about the death of the emperor or king of their country had to act sad. I'm afraid that in the world of S-Laser, it is difficult to find such a scene where the whole race is crying, even if you push it back 10,000 years or 10,000 years. However, in this mournful environment, there is still a small group of humans who are restless. This small group of humans is the so-called traitor. When the details of what Euphenia did outside the Holy Imperial capital came out, the traitors quickly passed the complete news to the Orcs. In the capital of the former Bori Kingdom, the high-level Orcs were gathering together for a meeting. Bori Kingdom is a very wealthy kingdom among human countries. The most popular thing in this country is hedonism. Their capital was once called the Pearl of the Human World. Unfortunately, Bori Kingdom has long been occupied by the Orcs, and even Bori Royal City, the Pearl of the Human World, has become the headquarters of the Orcs in the human world. The Orcs did not have the tradition of holding meetings before. At the beginning, the Orcs were an empire. Although the tribes were scattered, they were nominally under the jurisdiction of the Orc Empire. Even if there was friction between the tribes, they would just look at the size of their fists, and it was impossible for them to sit together for consultation. But now the new Orcs are in power. Although the empire has been eliminated, the new Orcs seem to be more united. The strongest of the new Orcs who obtained the God-given power became the high-ranking officials of the new Orcs. The invasion of the Orcs into the human world was initiated by these new Orcs. Generally speaking, they also solve the affairs of the Orcs together. If Euphenia was in Bori King City now, he would be able to recognize two of the Orcs in the meeting. One of them was Grom Hellscream, the Orcs ward master who had fought him face to face, and the other was Cairn Bloodhoof, who was killed by a Blood Elf army under his watch. In addition to these two, there were several Orcs attending the meeting. This means that there are about 10 Orcs with the strength of Grom and Cairn Bloodhoof among the new Orcs. In fact, the level of Grom and Cairn Bloodhoof is equivalent to the epic level of humans. If there are only 10, then humans can find more epic level masters. Let alone other things, the Holy Lion Empire can have more than 10 epic level masters. But now it is a war between two races, and the strong can only play a decisive role when the forces of both sides are evenly matched, just like the war between the Nenean Alliance and the Lava Kingdom in the Demon Realm. If the strength of the troops is too different, then even if there are more strong people, the war will still fail. Unfortunately, the strength of the human army is too different from that of the Orcs. Even the armies of the three major human empires have not yet popularized full professionalization. That is, there are still some soldiers who have not reached the strength of the war apprentice level. The most elite troops of humans are only bronze to silver level on average, and are generally royal guards, with a small number of them. In contrast, the Orcs all have God-given power, and even the lowest level green-skinned Orc infantry have a strength of about bronze level. With this level comparison, it is understandable that humans are still losing despite their resistance. The topic has gone a bit far, so let's go back to the meeting that the Orcs top leaders are holding. What these less than 10 new Orcs top leaders are discussing is exactly what Euphenia did outside the Holy Imperial capital. After the traitors informed the Orcs of this information, it was soon handed over to the hands of these Orcs high-ranking officials. For the Orcs, the emperors and kings of all human countries were killed at the same time, which was also a very explosive news. Among these Orcs high-ranking officials, Grom's mood was particularly excited, confused, or it's better to describe it as speechless. After learning the cause and effect of the matter, Grom felt very speechless. He didn't expect that the mysterious magician who had made him extremely angry and fearful before, who not only defeated him, but also turned the war and momentum between humans and orcs, would do such a shocking thing. No, now you can't call him a mysterious magician. The identity of that magician is very clear, the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire. The orcs of the Dark Knight Empire naturally know about it, a huge empire dominated by the elves. Since the orcs have come to the east of the Warcraft mountains, it is naturally impossible for them not to understand the distribution of forces in the east of Eslays. Although the new orcs have completely accepted the god-given power, unlike the ancient orcs, they are still the native orcs of Eslays in essence, and they also accept the history of the Eslays orcs. Therefore, their purpose of coming to the east of the Warcraft mountains is very clear, that is, to seek revenge on the human race for historical grudges. As for other races, they have no plans for the time being. It is also because of this that the new orcs did not care about the Dark Knight Empire. In fact, in order to avoid provoking too many powerful enemies, the new orcs deliberately avoided the human kingdoms close to the Dark Knight Empire when they marched into the human world, not to mention friction with the Dark Knight Empire. The orcs' high-level officials have always felt that their contact with the Dark Knight Empire will not be launched until most of the human countries, at least 2 empires, have been conquered by them. At that time, whether it is war or peace, the initiative will be in the hands of the orcs. But what they did not expect was that the Dark Knight Empire suddenly showed its presence in such a tyrannical manner. Even the army was not dispatched, and only the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire, an elf, caused chaos in the human world, and even the orcs were caught off guard. Among the orcs participating in the meeting, an old orc with a hunched body and a cane with a lot of medicine sacks hanging on the top of the cane spoke. Grom, you have fought with the Emperor in person, and you told us to pay attention to him before. Do you have anything to say now? Grom had been speechless, but he immediately answered after hearing the old orc's question. I have nothing to say. I have already explained to you the strength of the Dark Knight Empire Emperor. What is speechless now is that the human magician who was originally thought to be our great enemy has become the culprit who massacred the leaders of human countries. This transformation is really unexpected. Now Grom does not look as stupid as when he was cheesed by Yuffie, and he speaks very logically. After listening to Grom's words, the orc leaders present all nodded in agreement. Originally, they had discussed how to deal with the human magician who could turn the tide of the battle between hundreds of thousands of troops, but who could have thought that the magician who was already known as the hero of the human race would actually do such a thing. Such a magical turn of events, not everyone can turn around. The old orc with a cane spoke again. No matter how unexpected it is, and no matter why the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire did this, it seems that he did a great help to us orcs. But before that, he killed 300,000 of our troops. I can't even figure out whether the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire is helping us or hindering us. Thanks to the book friend Han Babusipoking for the monthly ticket. Thanks to the book friend Carrot 1888 Nyangbi rewards and evaluation tickets. It's just that the update ticket of 12,000 is really too much for Hangchen. Chapter 591 Rebirth. After hearing the old orc's words, the other orc leaders fell silent. Indeed, Yuffie's behavior was too strange. If he was helping the orcs, then he had previously released that powerful forbidden spell as the leader of a certain human army mage group, and killed 300,000 orcs, thus being called a national hero of mankind. If he was helping humans resist the orcs, then he caught all the leaders of human countries, and killed them all. This was not helping humans, no matter how you looked at it. Among the orc leaders, simple-minded guys like Grom and Cairn Bloodhoof could not understand what Yuffie meant, no matter how hard they tried. But among the orc leaders, there were more simple-minded guys than Grom and Cairn Bloodhoof. For example, the old orc with a cane, who was the leader of all the orc leaders, pointed out Yuffie's purpose. Now it seems that the Dark Knight Empire has big ambitions. Before, our orcs invaded human countries and were invincible. The Dark Knight Emperor helped humans to dampen our enthusiasm, so that we have not been able to make any big moves in the past half month. And after that, he captured the rulers of various human countries in one fell swoop as a human hero. No matter how you look at it, this is maintaining a balance, the balance between us orcs and humans. It's just that he killed all the rulers of human countries, which was a bit too much. From these two aspects, we can see that the Dark Knight Empire doesn't want us orcs to have an easy life, nor does it want humans to have an easy life. So what does it want? Maybe it's for both us orcs and humans to suffer losses. After a pause, the old orc finally said what he wanted to say. Then the ultimate goal of the Dark Knight Empire is obvious. After we and the human race are both defeated, they will come to sweep Esraz. You know, in ancient times, the elves were the only race that ruled the entire Esraz. The old orc's last sentence was meaningful, and the other orc leaders couldn't help but shudder. Yes, to be honest, in the most distant history, both orcs and humans were just vassal races under the rule of elves. Who knows if the Dark Knight Empire wants to restore the glory of the elves in ancient times. In particular, it is said that the core of the Dark Knight Empire cannot be regarded as the current elves, but a large elf tribe that survived from ancient times. The name of the Dark Knight Empire is named after this ancient elf tribe. The Night Elves, whose memories are still stuck in the ancient times, should hope that Esraz can be restored to its ancient state, right? The old orc's analysis made all the orc leaders agree deeply. If you think in this way, then what the Emperor of the Dark Knight Empire did is completely understandable. It's just that I understand it, but what should the orcs do next? The eyes of the orcs were still focused on the old orc. It was obvious that they still wanted the old orc to make the decision. The old orc was also used to this situation. He had always been the leader of the orcs' meetings. Now that other orcs were counting on him to make the decision, he continued to speak. Whether the Dark Knight Empire wanted to be the final beneficiary as we inferred, it seems that the Dark Knight Empire's emperor did something a bit too much. The loss of 300,000 orcs is nothing compared to the death of the leaders of various human countries at the same time. What we have to do now is to take advantage of the great chaos of humans and quickly attack human countries with all our troops. It is impossible for the Dark Knight Empire to see a scene where both sides suffer losses. Humans were not our orcs' opponents in the first place, and now they have even lost their leaders. Isn't it easy to defeat them? Although he had seen through Yufen's purpose, the old orc still chose to attack the human world, although he knew that this might be a conspiracy of the Dark Knight Empire. The other orc leaders did not raise any objections. They had originally let the old orc make the decision. However, Cain Bloodhoof showed embarrassment on his face. The old orc noticed that Cain Bloodhoof was abnormal, so he asked directly, "Cain, what happened? Is there anything wrong with the response I proposed?" The tall Tauren waved his hands quickly. No, Witch Doctor Vol'jin, I don't mean to oppose your decision. It's just that, if you want to attack with the whole army, I'm afraid I can't participate." As soon as this was said, the other orc leaders looked at Cain Bloodhoof with doubtful eyes, and some of them even looked at him with contempt. After invading the human world, Cain Bloodhoof's mission was the simplest among them, guarding the orc-occupied area of the Cannon Empire in the rear, and trying to make humans obey the rule of the orcs. Speaking of Cain Bloodhoof, who had this mission, was generally not allowed to come to Bori King City, but when he came, he happened to catch up with the collective meeting of the orc leaders, so no one pursued it. But now that Vol'jin Witch Doctor has made the decision that the new orcs will attack with all their forces to conquer the human world as soon as possible, this Tauren who left his garrison area actually shirked his responsibility. Is he still an honest Tauren? The old orc called Vol'jin Witch Doctor did not change his expression. He did not look at Cain Bloodhoof with the same eyes as other orc leaders, but continued to ask, "Ken, there must be a reason for you to say that, right? Can you tell us?" In fact, the status of these orc leaders is equal. Vol'jin Witch Doctor is just more prestigious, and he is older, so he is believed by everyone. If Cain Bloodhoof really does not want to follow the decision of the orcs high-level meeting, then they can't do anything about Cain Bloodhoof. Cain Bloodhoof's face flushed a little when he heard Vol'jin Witch Doctor's question. However, looking at the puzzled and contemptuous eyes of other orcs, he knew that, if he did not explain clearly, his image would be completely ruined, so he had to explain the reason for doing so in a somewhat awkward manner. "It's not that I don't want to participate in the total war, but I really can't spare the time." After saying this, Cain Bloodhoof only felt that the contemptuous eyes around him became more severe. "You didn't have time to come to the Bori King City?" Sensing this, Cain Bloodhoof quickly said the following words. There is a big problem in the occupied area Rygard. Some enemies who claim to be blood elves from the Warcraft mountains have been attacking the human Cannon Empire territory we occupied. Although I have put in a lot of effort, the blood elves with several troops of tens of thousands of people still caused great damage to our area. At this point, Kane Bloodhoof showed a bitter smile on his face. To be honest, I came here to ask for support, but this meeting took place before I could bring it up. Now that everyone has decided to launch a full-scale attack on the human world, I can only stop asking for support from you. After returning, I will try my best to withstand the attacks of the Blood Elves. As for participating in a full-scale war, I'm not strong enough. After explaining the reason, Kane Bloodhoof added, "Don't doubt that the Blood Elves are difficult to deal with. At the beginning, I was trying to make humans obey our rule in a small town. When I had fewer troops around me, I personally encountered a Blood Elf army. Although none of the Blood Elves were particularly strong, they killed me once with just a large number of soldiers. If I hadn't had the God-given power to be reborn, and those Blood Elves didn't know the peculiarities of the rebirth skill, you wouldn't see me now." Kane Bloodhoof looked extremely bitter. Obviously, he felt very defeated because he was killed by a group of ordinary Blood Elf troops instead of being killed alone by a stronger enemy. In fact, there was another mistake in his words. Although the Blood Elves didn't know the rebirth skill, Yufei behind them knew it. It was just that the abilities displayed by Kane Bloodhoof at that time were all derived from the earth-shaking divine bull, so Yufei did not associate it with the rebirth skills of the Tauran chieftain, so he was able to escape. Kane Bloodhoof's narration reduced the contemptuous looks around him. However, because of his words, the Orcs' high-ranking officials fell into thinking and discussion again. Thanks to the book friend 909,040,591 for the monthly ticket, and 100 Nyangbi reward. Chapter 592, Blood Elves' Strength. Among the Orcs, Kane Bloodhoof's strength is not weak, and he is above the middle level. And this is because most of his skills are control skills, and his killing ability is relatively weak. Generally speaking, Kane Bloodhoof cannot compete with more than half of the Orcs on the scene in terms of killing power, but it is extremely difficult to kill Kane Bloodhoof because of the existence of many control skills. However, the Blood Elves mentioned by Kane Bloodhoof actually allowed Kane Bloodhoof to survive by relying on the rebirth skill. Although Kane Bloodhoof did not bring many troops at that time, this was enough to attract the attention of the Orcs. Blood Elves? Vol'jin Witch Doctor first asked, after thinking for a while. "Ken, are you sure it's not the Night Elves? Living in the Warcraft mountains, it's really hard to believe." The old Orc keenly connected the Blood Elves and the Night Elves. After all, the names of these two races both have the word elves, and it is difficult not to be connected together. Kane Bloodhoof shook his head when he heard it. Maybe they are just a little bit similar in name. Although those enemies who call themselves Blood Elves also belong to the elves in appearance, the power they use is completely different from the power system of the Night Elves we have detected. Organizing his words, Kane Bloodhoof expressed his judgment. "In my opinion, those Blood Elves are somewhat similar to humans, because their main fighting method is actually a large-scale cavalry charge, and then a large number of magicians continuously cast magic to kill from a distance. This is a human fighting method, no matter how you look at it. But compared to humans, the power of those Blood Elf cavalry is much stronger. If an Orc warrior who has obtained the power of God fights against the Blood Elf cavalry alone, the loser will definitely be our Orc warrior. What's more, the damage that can be brought by the cavalry group charge is too huge." At this point, Kane Bloodhoof's face was already full of depression and gloom. What's even more annoying is that there are so many Blood Elf magicians, and they seem to cast magic without any magic power. Often, the Blood Elves never stop casting magic after a battle, causing heavy losses to my troops. As soon as this was said, the Orc leaders were talking about it. Indeed, magic is too annoying for the Orcs. The new Orcs who have completely accepted the power of God can no longer cast magic, so naturally they can't cast magic shields and the like. When facing magic, they will suffer complete damage. What made these Orc leaders feel even more strange was that when Kane Bloodhoof talked about the Blood Elves, they inexplicably felt a sense of familiarity in their hearts. Grom spoke hesitantly. "Why do I always feel like I've heard of this name before when I hear Kane mention Blood Elves?" The other orc leaders were startled and spoke up one after another. Grom, do you feel the same way? I'm not the only one who feels this way. That's weird. I've never heard of the Blood Elves before. Which Dr. Vol'jin had been quietly watching the reactions of the other orc leaders, and now he slowly opened his mouth and proposed a possibility. I think maybe those skydropped souls have heard of the Blood Elves before. After we have fully accepted the power bestowed by heaven, we always have some inexplicable memory fragments that we didn't have before. As he spoke, Witch Dr. Vol'jin's voice became low. Now I'm more convinced that the Blood Elves should be related to the Night Elves, even though they have a different power system. Don't you remember? When we learned about the Dark Empire and the Night Elves, we also had this strange sense of familiarity. The orc leaders were shocked. Yes. If Witch Dr. Vol'jin hadn't mentioned it, they would have forgotten that when they heard the name of the Night Elves, they also had this feeling now. If the two are combined, there must be a big problem. Didn't the Night Elves first appear in the Warcraft mountains? The Blood Elves who are making trouble in our rear also claim to live in the Warcraft mountains. There must be something fishy about this. The existence of the traitors has given the orcs detailed information about what happened in the human world and the surrounding areas. They also have a full understanding of the whole process of the appearance of the Night Elves and the Dark Knight Empire. After coming to the conclusion that the Blood Elves must be related to the Night Elves, the faces of the orcs' high-level officials became a little ugly. It turns out that the Night Elves are not only making trouble between humans and orcs, but also running to the rear of the orcs to make trouble. Well, in fact, the rear of the orcs should be regarded as the great desert west of the Warcraft mountains, but in the minds of the new orcs, the orcs will definitely live in the rich area east of the Warcraft mountains in the future. Then the former human territory that has been occupied has long been regarded as their territory by the orcs. Therefore, they will feel very disgusted with the Blood Elves' guerrilla warfare. After discussing for a while, it was still the Witch Dr. Vol'jin who made the final decision. The full-scale attack must continue. Kain, you don't have to participate. In addition, Grom, you also take the newly assigned troops to you and go to the cannon-occupied area with Kain. The stability of the rear is very necessary. We can't do the stupid thing of losing more old territories because of wanting to seize new territories. The orc leaders all agreed with this decision, and Kain Bloodhoof was even more surprised. Although he originally came to the Bori King city to seek help, after the orc high-level meeting made the decision to launch a full-scale attack on the human world, he was ready to take on the turmoil in the rear by himself. The support of Grom and his troops was a great help to him. However, this sense of surprise only existed for a while, and then disappeared without a trace. Just when the orc high-level meeting was almost over, and the orcs' next combat strategy was determined, a new problem arose. The meeting was over, and a short orc high-level who looked like a rat sitting closest to the door, opened the door of the Bori Palace. But what he saw was an orc waiting anxiously. It seemed that the orc had been waiting outside the hall for quite some time. Cyril, why are you here? Kain Bloodhoof said in surprise. Cyril was a wyvern rider under his command, and also his communications officer. But he did not bring Cyril with him when he came to the Bori King city. How could he be here? Kain Bloodhoof had an ominous premonition in his heart. Cyril had indeed been waiting outside the hall for a long time, but he knew that the meeting of the orc high-level officials must not be disturbed. Even if there was extremely important news, he could only wait helplessly. Now that he finally met his superior, Kain Bloodhoof, he hurriedly told him the news he wanted to report. Lord Kain, the number of Blood Elves in the cannon-occupied area has increased a lot. And those damn Blood Elves are no longer fighting in groups like before, but have gathered together to form 3 large forces to attack our city head-on. Cyril narrated at a very fast speed. By the time I left the cannon-occupied area, 3 small cities and 2 large cities had been conquered by the Blood Elves. Now, I'm afraid there are more. The number of Blood Elves has skyrocketed, and they have gathered together. We really can't stop them. Although Cyril was reporting this to Kain Bloodhoof, it was impossible for the other orc leaders around him not to hear his words. After learning about the Blood Elves' big move, everyone's faces immediately became subtle. With the previous analysis of Witch Dr. Vol'jin and their own judgment, the Blood Elves have been identified as part of the Night Elves. Except for the stupid orc leaders like Grom, the other orc leaders immediately figured out the hidden truth. Just after killing all the leaders of human countries on the human side, a raging fire has ignited in our orc backyard. No matter how you look at it, this is to maintain a balance. It seems that what Witch Doctor Vol'jin said is indeed correct. The Dark Knight Empire does have a great plot. Thanks to the book friend Chashu Chanking for the reward of 200 Nyangbi. Chapter 593, Ancient Orc Movements. The news brought by Cyril forced the Orcs' high-level meeting, which had already ended, to continue. Cyril, who was only a wyvern rider, was obviously not qualified to enter the main hall of the Bori Palace. Only the 10 Orcs high-level officials participated in the meeting, which Dr. Vol'jin said in a heavy tone. We still underestimated the Dark Knight Empire. Since those elves have great plans, there will be no mistakes that only cause a huge blow to the human side. Originally, it was not completely certain that the Blood Elves were the hidden power of the Dark Knight Empire, but from the current situation, it can be completely confirmed. What we need to discuss again now is whether the full-scale attack on the human world should continue, how to deal with the unrest in the cannon-occupied area, or how should we find a balance between these 2 points. Which Dr. Vol'jin asked 3 questions in a row, which made the Orcs' high-level officials fall into thinking. In addition to informing that the Blood Elves had occupied 3 small cities and 2 large cities belonging to the Orcs, Cyril also focused on describing the Blood Elves' surge in number and the powerful strength they showed. The power that the Blood Elves can exert in a war is unmatched by the Orcs. After a long discussion and voting, the Orcs' high-ranking officials finally made a helpless decision to temporarily suspend the full-scale attack on the human world, but the mobilization of the army must continue, and first arrange a large number of Orc troops to the border between the current Orc-occupied area and the human world, but keep them in place. Cairn Bloodhoof and Grom returned to the cannon-occupied area according to the previous plan, and tried to drive out the Blood Elves. Whether to attack the human world or not depends on the effectiveness of Cairn Bloodhoof and Grom's actions. If the 2 of them can quell the chaos brought by the Blood Elves and drive away the Blood Elves, or even without driving them away, just prevent the Blood Elves from conquering more territory in the cannon-occupied area, and maintain a stalemate, then the Orcs can safely launch a full-scale attack on the human world. If Cairn Bloodhoof and Grom cannot do the above, then the Orcs can only shift their focus to stabilizing the rear and quelling the war in the conquered areas. The troops stationed at the border between the Orc territory and the human world also had to be transferred back to fight the Blood Elves. As the saying goes, you must first stabilize the interior before attacking the outside. This was the final decision of the Orcs' top brass. When the rat-eyed Orcs' top brass opened the door of the hall again, everyone was worried about whether there would be more bad news. Fortunately, this did not happen, and the Orcs' top brass were able to arrange the affairs arising from the previous decision. While the Orcs were discussing the response measures to the changes in the human world in the riots in the rear, Euphenia's attention went to the rear of the Orcs. The rear here is not the cannon occupation area mentioned by the new Orcs, but the real rear of the Orcs, west of the Warcraft mountains. Not long after Euphenia returned to the Dark Knight Empire, he issued an order for the Blood Elves to increase harassment of the Orcs and the Night Elves to begin preparing for war. However, the bear warrior on the ice field west of the Warcraft mountains contacted Euphenia through a mental link. When Euphenia switched his perspective to the line display, he understood why the bear warrior contacted him. It turned out that a big event was about to happen on the Orc side. According to Euphenia's initial instructions, the bear warrior had been conducting friendly and in-depth exchanges with the Frostwolf clan in the name of the Snowfield Bear tribe to establish a good relationship. Because the bear warrior was regarded as an ancient orc, Chief Thrall of the Frostwolf clan had a very good impression of the bear warrior, so the bear warrior's friendship was quite effective. Especially when the Snowfield Bear monsters were fully revealed to the Frostwolf clan, the friendship between the 2 tribes was completely established. Before seeing the Snowfield Bear tribe mentioned by the bear warrior, it was still possible to suspect that everything the bear warrior said was fabricated, and the identity of the ancient orcs could also be doubted. But after seeing those Snowfield Bear monsters, that obviously did not completely accept the god-given power, this suspicion could be dispelled. For a clan, they welcome lone strongmen, but they are more willing to make friends with powerful tribes. Because compared to the lone strongmen who have no worries, the strong men in the tribe have worries, but they will not appear so unscrupulous. Besides, even if the average strength of a tribe is low, the role that the overall addition can play is much stronger than that of a lone strongman. With the Frost Wolf clan as a springboard, the Bear Warriors and the Snow Bear monsters were easily incorporated into the ancient Orcs camp. What caused the Bear Warrior to contact Ufeni was the big move that the ancient Orcs were going to make. When Ufeni switched his perspective to the Bear Warrior, he was in a big tent. Through the god's perspective, Ufeni easily discovered the existence of other orcs in the big tent. Chief Thrall was sitting next to the Bear Warrior and talking to the Bear Warrior. Ufeni just eavesdropped on the conversation between Chief Thrall and the Bear Warrior and analyzed the information he wanted to get from it. After listening to the conversation between the two for a while, and also taking in the conversations of other orcs in the big tent, Ufeni finally figured out what these ancient orcs were doing together. The orcs in this big tent are all ancient orcs. Of course, ordinary ancient orcs are not qualified to appear here. Sitting in the big tent, either a lone ancient orc with extremely powerful strength, or an orc chief who leads a tribe. Of course, generally speaking, the strength of the orc chief himself is also very strong. The essence of these ancient orcs gathered together, and naturally they would not do something like Group P healthcare to keep in touch, but to discuss a plan together. This plan has a resounding name: Glory Restoration Operation. Similarly, this resounding plan also has an exciting slogan: prove to the pseudo-orcs who are the orcs, and restore the glory of the orcs. In fact, the new orcs are the names given to themselves by the orcs who have completely accepted the power of God. Before, the new ancient orcs also used this name by default. But now the ancient orcs really seem to be going to take a big action. They no longer use the name of new orcs, but call the new orcs pseudo-orcs. The meaning is self-evident. As Ufeni expected, the ancient orcs gathered here to discuss how to improve the status of the ancient orcs, instead of being squeezed into the desolate corners by the majority of new orcs like now. Well, in fact, compared with the rich land east of the Warcraft mountains, the original territory of the orcs can only be regarded as barren no matter where. But barrenness also has its own levels. The ancient orcs were driven to the most barren places in the barren land west of the Monster Mountain range. You can imagine how uncomfortable they were. But now, the ancient orcs have found an opportunity. The focus of the new orcs has shifted to the human world. Most of the new orcs have crossed the ever-burning trail opened up in the endless jungle to the human world. In the original territory of the orcs, the power comparison between the new orcs and the ancient orcs is no longer as great as before. After more and more new orcs went to the human world, the ancient orcs finally couldn't bear it. How could they, who claim to be the orthodox orcs, endure being excluded and suppressed by the new orcs? No, pseudo-orcs who have abandoned the traditions of the orcs. Therefore, there was this gathering of the essence of the ancient orcs. The Bear Warrior, who was a powerful individual and the chief of a bear tribe, was naturally pulled into this gathering. The so-called Glory Restoration Operation is, to put it bluntly, it is for the ancient orcs to unite and fight against the new orcs to obtain the status and interests they want. Ufeni, who knew the whole story, was happy to see the actions of the ancient orcs. He was worried that the Blood Elves alone might not be able to contain the new orcs, and that what he had done in the human world would benefit the new orcs. As a result, the ancient orcs solved this problem for Ufeni, just like a timely help. How could he not be happy? If the new orcs didn't care about the fire in the rear of the occupied area, then the real rear of the orcs' territory also caught fire. Can the new orcs not care? Oh, I uploaded chapter 584 and forgot to post it. I'm really sorry for making everyone wait until now. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 594, Encirclement. Among the ancient orcs who participated in the so-called Glory Restoration Operation, Chief Thrall seemed to have a relatively high status. As a result, the Bear Warrior also became one of the ancient orcs with a relatively high status. Of course, this is also linked to strength. The personal strength of the Bear Warrior and the strength of the Snow Bear monsters are both top-notch among the ancient orcs, so they will naturally be valued. The ancient orcs who gathered together did not actually form a close organization like the new orcs. They just set up the name of an alliance. In fact, they still fought on their own when fighting. At most, those who were closer to each other would say help each other. This is also to maintain the so-called orc tradition, because the orcs have existed as tribes, rather than as a whole for a long time. The ancient orcs, under the banner of restoring the true glory of the orcs, naturally would not be as closely united as the new orcs. As for those lone orc warriors, they each found a tribe they liked and temporarily joined. The Snow Bear tribe of the Bear Warrior also had 2 lone bear warriors join him. The Bear Warrior thought about it and accepted them. After learning about the ancient orcs' way of uniting, Yufei was speechless. No wonder these ancient orcs were squeezed into corners by the new orcs to survive. They deserved it. It's right to maintain traditions, but it's also weird to maintain them to this extent. They are unwilling to make changes, even though the situation is so difficult. They still fight against the new orcs and tribes. Yufei thinks that the ancient orcs have no hope of winning. However, whether the ancient orcs win or not has nothing to do with Yufei. He just needs these ancient orcs to slightly distract the attention of the new orcs, so that the new orcs can't seize the opportunity to conquer the human world when it is in chaos. After this period of time, Yufei doesn't care whether the ancient orcs are recovered successfully or suppressed. After giving the bear warriors an order to adapt to the situation and kill as many new orcs as possible while preserving their manpower, Yufei shifted his perspective back. Those new orcs seemed to have responded to the constant harassment of the Blood Elves, and Yufei had to go and see. When Yufei was on his way back to the Dark Knight Empire, he had already ordered the Blood Elves to increase the number of troops entering the orc-occupied area of the Cannon Empire. Under his order, a total of 300,000 Blood Elves entered the orc-occupied area of the Cannon Empire and turned it upside down. As for why it was 300,000, it was naturally because the Blood Elves only had 3 heroes now. That's right, the Blood Magician, the Omni Knight and the Chaos Knight have all been dispatched, each leading a 100,000 Blood Elf army to fight separately. As of now, a quarter of the territory of the Cannon Empire occupied by the Orcs has been ravaged by the Blood Elves. Many cities have been captured by the Blood Elves, but there is no need to occupy such enclaves. The Blood Elves simply handed over the ruling power of these cities, where the Orcs were destroyed to the humans in the city. The Orcs did not do anything like a massacre in the human country, which surprised Yufei. But this is better. Even if the Orcs did not massacre the humans in the areas they conquered, those humans would never be grateful to the Orcs, and the hatred would still exist. Now the Blood Elves have handed over the ruling power of those cities to humans. Even if the Blood Elves retreat, the Orcs will still have to work hard to take back these cities. Yufei shifted his attention to the Blood Elves because Cairn Bloodhoof, who had disappeared for a few days, appeared again. Moreover, he appeared with a large number of Orc troops. Speaking of which, Yufei himself was a little ashamed. At that time, the Blood Elf detachment killed Cairn Bloodhoof with its numerical advantage and left directly. Yufei regarded Cairn Bloodhoof as the Earthshaker Bull, but forgot that this name was obviously the name of the Tauren chieftain. When the Blood Elves saw Cairn Bloodhoof again later, he remembered the skill of rebirth. However, this also made Yufei more interested in Cairn Bloodhoof. If you ask everyone to choose one of the hero skills in Warcraft for themselves, some people may choose mirror clones, and some people may choose invincibility, but if Yufei were to choose, he would definitely choose the skill of rebirth. This is one more skill. A longer time interval will give you more than one more life. Before, when there were only 100,000 Blood Elves and the 3 Blood Elf heroes only dispatched 1 Blood Mage, the Blood Elves had already made Cairn Bloodhoof very anxious. A few days ago, the Blood Elves suddenly found that Cairn Bloodhoof, who had been leading the Orcs to resist them in various places, was missing. But they did not care, and just continued to execute Yufei's orders. After the 3 heroes led 300,000 Blood Elves, and caused a huge mess in the Orc-occupied area of the Cannon Empire, Cairn Bloodhoof had not appeared yet, which made Yufei a little confused. Did the Orcs give up the place they occupied in the Cannon Empire? On second thought, Yufei felt that this was impossible. To the west of the Cannon Empire is the endless jungle. If the Orcs gave up this place, the road between them and the original territory of the Orcs would be cut off. Cairn Bloodhoof disappeared for a few days. Maybe he went to ask for reinforcement. Yufei was actually happy to see Cain Bloodhoof asking for reinforcement. The reason is simple. If the orcs dispatch troops to deal with the unrest in the orc-occupied area of the Cannon Empire, then they will naturally have no leisure and strength to launch a large-scale attack on the chaotic human world. However, after careful observation, Yufei felt that Cain Bloodhoof was a bit disappointing. You just called for reinforcement, but as a Tauren chieftain, you only brought back such a few troops. Isn't it inconsistent with your identity? Cain Bloodhoof brought back only about 200,000 troops, and Yufei could easily find that these orcs did not seem to be veterans. The key is that there is only one orc strongman supporting Cain Bloodhoof, and it is the one Yufei knows. Gromhell Scream, you, the funny guy invited by the Bull Demon King, are you ready to face death? Outside the city of Zurich, although Yufei slapped Grom's face with actual actions, he did not retaliate against Grom. He was still very unhappy that he was called a grandson by this green ghost. It just so happened that Grom and Cain Bloodhoof had come to the orc-occupied area of the Cannon Empire to fight the Blood Elves. If Yufei didn't take this opportunity to completely avenge the taunting Grom had given him, he would be unworthy of being the father god of the Night Elves and the Blood Elves, and the emperor of the Night Empire. With such an idea in mind, Yufei would naturally react to the Blood Elf troops. Under his secret mobilization, 3 Blood Elf troops, each with 100,000 men, quietly gathered together and joined forces to kill Grom together with a reinforcement brought back by Cain Bloodhoof. If the Blood Elves really did such a thing, then the new orcs would not still pay attention to the situation in the Cannon Empire occupied area, right? The Blood Elves have been fighting in the orc occupied area, not just to harass the orcs and attract their attention. You have to know that at the beginning, Yufei hadn't made such a big thing in the human world, and naturally he would not have expected that the Blood Elves he sent to mess with the orcs on a whim would play a big role now. When the Blood Elves went out and attacked the orcs, a large part of the reason was to obtain flesh and blood resources. The training of the Night Elves troops only requires wood and energy. The Night Elves are not short of energy now. Even the energy for the Blood Elves to train their troops is provided by the Night Elves. As for wood, the elves only need to surround the trees to absorb it. With the large number of elves constantly collecting it, it is also enough. But the Blood Elves are different. Although energy is not lacking, because of the sharing of the Night Elves, flesh and blood resources are not as simple as the Night Elves obtaining wood resources. When in the demon world, there were still a large number of hostile demons to provide flesh and blood resources to the Blood Elves. It was because of these demons who contributed their own flesh that the Blood Elves were able to develop rapidly to the current total of 300,000 or 400,000. But the demon world has been destroyed now, and the source of flesh and blood resources from demons has been cut off. Although Yufei has stored some flesh and blood resources, if he does not open up, these flesh and blood resources will not be able to sustain the high intensity war that will break out in Eslays next. Therefore, in order to obtain more flesh and blood resources for development, the Blood Elves turned to the Orcs. The native Orcs of Eslays, who were instilled with God-given power, which was actually the power of the Orcs in Warcraft, could provide flesh and blood resources that were almost the same as those of demons. As for humans, because ordinary people and even ordinary human soldiers were weak and small in size, they could provide very few flesh and blood resources, which made the Blood Elves not very interested. Otherwise, after conquering the cities of the Cannon Empire occupied by the Orcs, the Blood Elves would not just kill all the Orcs and let the humans go. Cain Bloodhoof is now stationed in a large city with Grom and 200,000 Orc recruits to discuss the next action. After returning to the Cannon occupied area, Cain Bloodhoof realized the seriousness of his misconduct. The city where he originally led the army had actually been conquered by the Blood Elves. He had no choice but to station in this city. And this place is already the border between the Blood Elf ravaged area and the Orc occupied area. In a room in the center of the city, Cyril was reporting the latest situation in the occupied Cannon area, while Cain Bloodhoof and Grom were sitting at the top listening to Cyril's report. They needed to know the specific situation before they could arrange the army to counterattack the Blood Elves' harassment. However, these two Orc high-ranking men, who possessed the abilities of Warcraft Orc heroes, did not know that the city they were in had been gradually surrounded by 300,000 Blood Elves. 19 update tickets are so envious. but Hongchen didn't get up until after 9 o'clock tonight, and I had a headache. I couldn't even update the 2 chapters I was supposed to update. Cack. Today is just this chapter of 3000 words, and I will make up for it tomorrow. Chapter 595 City 13. The city where Cairn, Bloodhoof and Grom were originally located had a name when it belonged to humans, but after being occupied by the Orcs, most of the cities in the Cannon-occupied area lost their original names and were directly named by the Orcs, who wanted to facilitate management and statistics. The city that has been gradually surrounded by the Blood Elves is numbered 13. If Cairn, Bloodhoof and Grom were also travelers from Earth, they would know that 13 does not seem to be a good number. Thinking that they have an advantage in both quantity and quality, and even in the number of strong people, the Blood Elves did not even try to cover up when they surrounded the 13th city. Especially after the large loose encirclement was formed, the Blood Elves directly exposed their troops to the eyes of the Orc scouts with an arrogant look. In the 13th city, Cairn, Bloodhoof and Grom had just listened to Cyril's report on the current situation in the Cannon-occupied area, and both of them looked a little heavy. They did not expect that the situation had deteriorated to this extent. When Cyril rushed to the Bori King city to look for Cairn, Bloodhoof, the Blood Elves had only captured 5 cities. As a result, by the time Cairn, Bloodhoof returned with the Orc army and Grom, more than a quarter of the Cannon-occupied area had been occupied, and nearly 20 cities had been captured by the Blood Elves. Although these nearly 20 cities were relatively insignificant, most of them were small cities, rather than important towns, but this had dealt a heavy blow to the Orcs both in terms of momentum and in reality. Since they opened up the ever-burning trail in the endless jungle and came to the eastern part of the Warcraft mountains, the Orcs had always been the ones bullying others. How could they be pressed step by step by the Blood Elves who came out of nowhere? According to Grom, since they had brought reinforcement, they should immediately integrate the 200,000 Orc soldiers they brought with them, and the Orc troops originally in the Cannon-occupied area, conduct a sweep of the Cannon-occupied area, and drive the Blood Elves back to the Warcraft mountains. Cairn, Bloodhoof disagreed with Grom's opinion. Having fought with the Blood Elves personally, he knew how difficult the Blood Elves were. Their troop composition was very similar to that of humans, but they were 10 or 100 times stronger than humans. Cairn, Bloodhoof thought that they should wait and do nothing until they have thoroughly understood the strength of the Blood Elves. However, whether it was Grom's immediate attack or Cairn, Bloodhoof's inaction, they subconsciously ignored what to do if the Blood Elves attacked them. This was not because the 2 Orcs were careless, but because they felt that, since they had brought 200,000 reinforcement, the Blood Elves should be on guard. They would definitely not attack the cities that already belonged to the Orcs in the Cannon-occupied area without restraint as before. However, the Blood Elves did the opposite of Euphena's order. While Cairn, Bloodhoof and Grom were still discussing strategies, they had completely surrounded city number 13. Bang! The door was rushed open by a hurried figure. Cairn, Bloodhoof and Grom in the house looked at the figure who rushed in with some displeasure. These were 2 Orc high-ranking officials discussing something. How could someone dare to break in so casually? However, when they saw clearly that the person who rushed in was Cyril, who had just reported the situation and left not long ago, they put down their unhappy emotions. When they saw Cyril's ugly face, Cairn, Bloodhoof and Grom were both shocked. What happened? Cairn, Bloodhoof's low voice sounded, and he asked Cyril, who had returned, in confusion. Cyril did not hesitate, and quickly reported the situation that the scouts had just discovered. Lord Cairn, city number 13 has been surrounded by Blood Elves. Hearing this, Cairn, Bloodhoof and Grom were both shocked. They were still discussing how to drive the Blood Elves out of the Cannon-occupied area, but they did not expect the Blood Elves to attack them and catch them off guard. Waving his hand to signal Grom to follow him, Cairn, Bloodhoof strode out of the hall and walked towards the wall of city number 13. After personally going to the wall to see the situation, Cairn, Bloodhoof realized the seriousness of the situation. Although it was just a quick glance, Cairn, Bloodhoof was able to judge that the number of Blood Elves outside city number 13 that had surrounded the city was no less than that of the Orc soldiers inside the city. More importantly, Cairn, Bloodhoof knew clearly that the strength of the Blood Elf army was much stronger than the 200,000 Orc recruits he brought back. How could this happen? Grom, who followed Cairn, Bloodhoof to the city wall, raised a surprised voice. He couldn't believe that he had just arrived at the cannon-occupied area and was surrounded by blood elves. Suddenly, Grom felt familiar with the situation in front of him. Wasn't the situation in the human city of Cyric the same as that in city number 13? However, he was a strong attacker at that time, but now he has become the defender of the city. It's really a matter of time. However, Grom, who has not seen the strength of the blood elves, still has the confidence to defeat the blood elves. According to Cairn Bloodhoof's description and Cyril's report, the main components of the blood elf army are cavalry and mages. Cavalry has no effect in siege warfare. Not every type of cavalry can cause huge damage to the city wall or even directly destroy the city wall like wolf cavalry. As for magicians, Grom has lost count of how many human magicians have fallen in his hands. Even if the number and strength of blood elf magicians are higher than that of humans, Grom is confident that he can turn the blood elf magician camp upside down. Because the blood elves did not deliberately hide, the orc scouts discovered the blood elf army quite early. Even before receiving the order from Cairn Bloodhoof, the original orc defenders of city number 13 had already climbed up the city wall to launch a defense. Taking off the totem pole on his back and stroking the battlements of the city wall of city number 13 with both hands, Cairn Bloodhoof sighed in his heart. Unexpectedly, the orcs would also rely on human buildings for defense one day. In fact, according to Cairn Bloodhoof's previous temperament, what he would do now is to lead all the orc soldiers in the city to rush out of city number 13 and have an exciting battle with the blood elves. However, most of the people in city 13 are new orcs. To be on the safe side, Cairn Bloodhoof hesitated and made a decision to use static tactics. As for Grom, in the orc high level meeting, which Dr. Vol'jin had asked him to accept Cairn Bloodhoof's arrangements, after arriving in the cannon-occupied area, and not to raise any objections easily. The cannon-occupied area was originally Cairn Bloodhoof's territory. Grom actually knew that he was stupid, because he only knew how to fight, so he obeyed Cairn Bloodhoof's arrangements. Outside the city, the three heroes of the Blood Elves, Blood Mage, Omni Knight and Chaos Knight, had gathered together. 300,000 Blood Elves gathered together, so they naturally needed a leader. There is no doubt that the Blood Mage, as a representative of wisdom, became the leader of the Blood Elf troops. Compared with the heroes of the Night Elves, the Blood Mage is actually more intelligent. Because the Blood Elf magician who was transformed into a Blood Mage was transformed from the original Blood Elves in the demon world. He was not made from the military building, and at this time he was thinking about how to capture the Orc City 13 in front of him. When Tyrande was not at a high level, Eupheli chose to delegate power and train Tyrande. Now that the Blood Mage is already quite intelligent, Eupheli will not interfere too much with his decision, but let the Blood Mage arrange the war himself. He wanted to see if the Blood Elves could become a force on their own, rather than a supplement and vassal of the Night Elves. Perhaps the Blood Mage also knew what Eupheli meant. After coming from the destroyed demon world, or to be more precise, returning to the world of Slays, the Blood Elves soon learned that it was not only the Blood Elves that were favored by the Father God, but also the Night Elves in Slays who were more favored by the Father God than them. Even with the support of the Father God, the Night Elves also established an empire on the continent of Slays, which made the Blood Elves extremely envious. The Blood Elves with high intelligence also have the emotion of competing for favor, but fortunately this emotion is benign, and what they want to do is to better complete the tasks assigned by the Father God. Originally, the Blood Mage thought that the Orcs would rush out and fight them to the death. When they attacked those cities before, even if they were at a great disadvantage in numbers, the Orcs would rush out of the city to fight the Blood Elves. This is because the Orcs are not familiar with city defense battles, and are more adept at field battles. Unexpectedly, when there are more than 200,000 Orc troops in city number 13, they did not go out of the city to fight the Blood Elves. This made the Blood Mage hesitate. Should they attack the city? Or should they just surround the Orcs and wait for new reactions? It is not the Blood Mage's fault for hesitating. Compared with the Night Elves who have glaive throwers, mobile turrets, mountain giants, and even ancient guardians, the Blood Elves are not very good at attacking cities. The Orcs are now acting out of character, which makes the Blood Mage wonder if there is a conspiracy. However, this hesitation only exists in the Blood Mage's mind for a while. The Blood Elves' encirclement was very sudden, and the Blood Mage did not believe that the Orcs could discover and lay out the conspiracy long in advance. Anyway, this city number 13 is definitely going to be captured. The Blood Mage still doesn't believe it. What kind of waves can 200,000 new Orcs cause? Without siege equipment, just use magic to flatten the city wall. There is not much else in the Blood Elves, but there are magicians. Today's 3 updates are 9,000 words =_ speaking of which, I don't know why Hanshin is still not energetic. If I hadn't been kept awake by drinking coffee, I would have fallen asleep long ago. Chapter 596, Magic Frenzy. After the Blood Mage made the decision, the Blood Elf army quickly took action. Just as the Blood Mage thought, the proportion of magicians in the Blood Elf army was probably unprecedented in the world of Esleys. There has never been a troop of more than 10,000 in Esleys where the number of magicians exceeded half. Not to mention, there are now more than 150,000 Blood Elf magicians in the 300,000 Blood Elf army. Yufei felt that it would take the magicians of the entire human world added together to be more than the magicians of the Blood Elves. But in terms of average quality, human magicians are still not as good as Blood Elf magicians. The first to take action was not a large number of Blood Elf magicians, but the Blood Mage, the leader of the Blood Elf army. He raised his sleeves and threw a small fireball towards City 13. This fireball was indeed very small, and it seemed that it was not as powerful as the fireball spell released by ordinary Blood Elf magicians through primary chaos spells. The Orcs on the city wall, even Cairn Bloodhoof and Grom, noticed the small fireball that was swaying in the air and seemed to be blown out by a gust of wind. They were full of doubts. How could the Blood Elves outside the city expect to use such a weak fireball to break through the walls of city number 13? Don't be kidding. City number 13 is a fortress city that the Orcs took from humans. It existed as a military camp for Orcs in the Cannon occupation area. No humans were left in it. It took a lot of effort for the Orcs to capture such a fortress city. How could it be broken by such a small fireball? Unconsciously, the eyes of the soldiers on both sides of the battlefield were focused on the small fireball in the air. Whether it was the Blood Elves or the Orcs, their faces were full of teasing. However, the Orcs were teasing about this small fireball, while the Blood Elves were teasing about the Orcs' ignorance. Under the gaze of the soldiers on both sides, the fireball sent by the Blood Magician finally fell at the base of the city wall of city number 13. This situation made the Orcs stunned, and then burst into laughter. It was funny enough to send such a ridiculous little fireball to attack the solid city wall, but it was also misplaced and failed to hit the city wall. Isn't this too funny? The Orcs in city number 13 suddenly felt a power surge in their bodies. What is there to be afraid of fighting such a funny enemy? Is there a possibility of failure? Unfortunately, the Orcs were too happy too early. How could the Blood Mage's attack be as simple as a small fireball? Moreover, how could the skill that automatically locks the target when attacking be misplaced? The fireball fell under the city wall, which meant that the place the Blood Mage originally wanted to attack was the base of the city wall. As the Orc soldiers laughed loudly, a boom suddenly came from the place where the small fireball fell. The Orcs who were laughing happily stopped laughing in confusion and cast their eyes towards the place where the fireball fell. The wall where the Blood Magician's fireball landed was now engulfed in flames. Several pillars of fire rose from the ground along the entire wall. These pillars of fire kept rotating, causing more flying flames. A firestorm appeared in front of the Orcs. The extremely solid wall actually showed signs of cracking and collapse in this firestorm. This bizarre scene made the Orcs in City 13 stare with wide eyes. How could the flames destroy the wall? No, how could such a small fireball form such a strong firestorm? Exclamation mark. Although the new Orcs completely accepted the god-given power and gave up the magic fighting spirit they originally practiced, it did not mean that they did not understand magic. Apart from anything else, most Orcs had experienced the magic attacks of human magicians when fighting against humans. But even the most experienced Orc soldiers had never seen such a scene before. In memory, magic with such a huge range and seemingly strong lethality should be close to the category of forbidden spells. But the forbidden spell shouldn't be so easy to cast, right? The Blood Mage's attack this time was naturally not a forbidden spell, but his skill, the Flame Storm. In the game, the flame storm can burn the forest to open up a road, and it can also destroy buildings. Reflected in this reality, it can naturally be used to destroy the city wall. Since the Blood Mage, as the leader, has fired the first shot, the rest of the Blood Elf magicians will naturally not be willing to fall behind. Soon, overwhelming magic flew towards City 13. This time, overwhelming is definitely not an exaggerated adjective, and it may even be a bit conservative. The sky above City 13, which was originally light blue, has now become colorful. Hundreds of thousands of magics of different attributes and colors have covered the sky above City 13 for more than one layer, and they all fell towards this unfortunate city. The Orcs in City 13 have not yet recovered from the shock of a small fireball suddenly turning into a huge flame storm, and they saw the spectacular scene of hundreds of thousands of magic falling at the same time. The colorful magic that covered the entire sky looked as gorgeous as the aurora, but it contained a deadly murderous intent. However, due to the rapid expansion of the number of Blood Elf magicians, most of them were still at the ordinary level, and could only release low-level magic. For the Orcs who had been transformed by the power of God, elementary magic was not enough to cause fatal damage. After all, it was impossible for every Orc soldier to be unlucky and undergo the baptism of several magics at the same time. The Blood Mage also knew this, so under his command, only a few of the first wave of hundreds of thousands of magics actually flew into the interior of city number 13, attacking the Orcs in the city in a scattered manner. Most of the magic was bombarded on the city wall. With the obstruction of the city wall, the combat power of the Blood Knights could not be exerted, and the combat power of the Blood Elf troops would be reduced by more than half. The first thing the Blood Mage had to do, and was doing, was to clear a smooth path for the Blood Knights' charge. Although the flame storm was strong, it was only the skill of the Blood Mage alone. Even if it could cause some damage to a section of the wall of city number 13, it couldn't do more. However, when hundreds of thousands of magics bombarded the wall, the effect was different. Countless fireballs, ice arrows and wind blades fell fiercely on the wall. Under the wall, that people couldn't see, there were also a large number of ground spikes drilling into the wall, destroying the structure of the wall. In fact, there were also some random middle and higher level magics cast by chaos in this wave of magic, but the number of low level magics was too large, which made the more powerful middle and higher level magics less noticeable. Even though most of them were low level magics, in the end, a total of 100,000 fell on the wall of city number 13. The solid wall of this fortress city seemed extremely fragile at this moment. Perhaps it was just a single fire magic or water magic attack, and the stone wall would not be easily destroyed, but the magic released by the Blood Elf magician using chaos magic was random, with various attributes. When a large amount of ice magic hit the city wall, and froze it hard, and then the fire magic that followed burned it at extremely high temperatures, even the city wall reinforced by human magic could not help, but gradually break apart. The Orc soldiers on the city wall had already fled down the city wall when the magic fell. Even the powerful Cairn Bloodhoof and Grom were frightened by the magic frenzy, and hurriedly left the city wall like ordinary Orc soldiers. Looking at the city wall, that was gradually collapsing under the massive magic bombardment, Grom muttered to himself, "Damn, this is too scary." Cairn Bloodhoof laughed bitterly beside him. "Now you should know how much pressure I was under before, right?" In fact, Cairn Bloodhoof had never seen such a magnificent scene before. When he was still in the cannon-occupied area, there were only about 100,000 Blood Elves here, and they were scattered into several teams. Although there were many magicians in these teams, the magic they cast was not as terrifying as it is now. Cairn Bloodhoof suddenly had some doubts in his heart. Was it a wrong decision for the Orcs to give up the fighting magic they had originally practiced, and choose to fully accept the God-given power? Looking at the Blood Elves now, their magic attacks are too powerful. Shaking his head, Cairn Bloodhoof threw away this idea. Even if they had not given up fighting magic before, the Orcs would not have had so many full-time magicians. If they had not accepted the God-given power, I'm afraid that the Orcs would not even be able to cross the endless jungle. Moreover, it was too late to think about these things. What should be done now is to quickly come up with a way to deal with the Blood Elves' offensive. The Blood Elves' magic frenzy gradually began to advance from the walls of city number 13 to the interior with waves of uniform casting. Although it is a fortress city, there are still many buildings in city number 13. The Blood Magicians have made up their minds to clear a wide charging path for the Blood Knights, and naturally they have to clear all obstacles. Cain Bloodhoof frowned. If this continues, the orcs can only be gradually devoured by this magic frenzy that seems to have no pause. Even if the Blood Elves' magic offensive stops, the orcs' defensive advantage will no longer exist. After thinking for a while, he pulled over Grom, who was staring at the Blood Elves' gorgeous magic offensive in amazement, and whispered in his ear, "Now the only one who can save the situation is you. Rush into the formation of those Blood Elf magicians and roll up the Blade Storm. Anyway, those magics can't hurt you when you cast the Blade Storm." Grom swallowed and accepted the task. Chapter 597, Death of Grom. Yufei had been observing the battlefield of City 13 from a god's perspective. During his observation, after Cain Bloodhoof whispered a few words to Grom, Grom suddenly disappeared in City 13, and no one knew where he went. With a thump in his heart, Yufei immediately knew what Grom had gone to do. The situation on the battlefield was not favorable for the orcs. Grom, who was considered the nemesis of mages, disappeared. He must have used the wind step to cut the back row. As a skill in Warcraft, the wind step was indeed strange. S-Laser also had the thief profession and the so-called invisibility, but that kind of crude invisibility could not be hidden under Yufei's powerful mental power. Even the stronger Blood Elf magicians or Night Elves could break such invisibility by intuition. But Grom's wind step was not even visible to Yufei, and he could not find any trace of this Orc's Ward Master. Fortunately, the wind step is not invincible. Although Yufei himself cannot break this skill, he can use other methods. About half a minute after Grom disappeared in city number 13, some Blood Knights who were guarding the front of the Blood Elf magician camp suddenly took out small bags and then spilled the contents of the bags. What? With the falling of strange dust, a green figure suddenly appeared in the Blood Knight team and asked incredulously. Looking closely, it was Grom who disappeared in city number 13. Now Grom was extremely shocked, and even mixed with a sense of panic. His wind step has always been a god level ability that cannot be broken. Even the detection magic cast by the so-called legendary epic magicians of humans cannot detect his traces. In Grom's view, the importance of the wind step skill is even higher than the Blade Storm. But when he was carefully shuttling through the Scarlet Knights, trying to reach the camp of the Blood Elf magicians behind the Scarlet Knights, and start a bladder storm to kill them, the strange dust suddenly sprinkled by the Scarlet Knights revealed his whereabouts. This made Grom, who always thought that the wind step was impossible to break, unacceptable. The strange dust sprinkled by the Scarlet Knights was actually the appearance dust that could be exchanged for the Night Elves' miracle ancient tree. In the Warcraft game, the appearance dust is the best item to deal with the Bladder Master's wind step. With the appearance dust, Grom can't think of being invisible and cutting back in front of the Blood Elves. In fact, the appearance dust is just Yufei's first measure to prevent Grom's sneak attack. After all, this consumable needs to be used actively. If Grom has walked out of the coverage of the appearance dust when using it, then these props will be wasted. Between the Scarlet Knights and the Blood Elf magician formation behind, there is a small pillar with strange eyes at a distance. The strange eyes on the small pillars radiated a faint light, covering a large area around. Even if Grom was lucky enough to get into the Blood Elf magician's formation before or after the Blood Knights used the developing dust, he would still be nowhere to hide. Because these small pillars with strange eyes are another type of props that can be exchanged in the miracle ancient tree, which can detect the sentry guards of invisible units. Although the detection range of the sentry guards is relatively small, it takes a lot of sentry guards to cover the area where the Blood Elf magicians are located, but Yufei is not short of this energy now. With a wave of his hand, he asked the Blood Elves to carry a large number of sentry guards when they went out. Before the attack on city number 13, the Blood Elves had already inserted the sentry guards around the Blood Elf magician's formation. No matter which direction Grom wants to raid from, he will definitely be discovered. However, these sentry guards were now useless. Grom, who had no defense against the Blood Elves' anti-stealth measures, was directly exposed by the appearing dust in the Scarlet Knights team. This was the best situation for the Blood Elves. If he was discovered only after breaking through to the sentry guards, it would still cause a lot of losses to the Blood Elf magicians. Although he was shocked that his invincible wind step could be broken by these Blood Elves whose individual strength was not strong, Grom was a strong man who was also in the upper echelons of the epic level. He quickly realized that his situation was not good at this time and hurriedly used other skills to fish in troubled waters. Grom, who had already revealed his figure under the effect of the appearing dust, shook his body and turned into several identical green-skinned orcs. Obviously, he used the mirror clone skill to confuse the audience and see if he could break through the Scarlet Knight's blockade. But unfortunately, if Grom retreated as soon as possible after being discovered instead of thinking about continuing to complete the task, he might still be able to get away. But he had already been exposed by the effect of the appearing dust, but he still wanted to rush to the rear of the Blood Elf army to kill a large number of Blood Elf magicians without knowing the consequences, which angered the heroes among the Blood Elves. Seeing Grom transform into several identical green-skinned orcs, Chaos Knight was the first to sneer. Chaos Knight, who had already rushed here when Grom was discovered, also transformed into several Chaos Knights. Grom's original body, mixed with the mirror clones, was stunned. What? There are actually people among the Blood Elves who have this skill? Grom still overestimated himself. The illusion created by Chaos Knight was formed by his ultimate skill in anger, which was much stronger than Grom's mirror clone with only ordinary skills. Mirror clones do not have attack capabilities in the game, and can only play a role in confusing people. In this real alien world, although Grom's mirror clone also has a certain attack power, it is greatly weakened compared to the original body, and will withstand several times the damage. The clone created by Chaos Knight's ultimate skill illusion has the same attributes as the original body, but it cannot use the skills of the original body. In terms of taking damage, it only takes double the damage, and the mirror clone is simply weaker than it. The difference between the two skills was soon reflected after Grom and Chaos Knight's respective illusions engaged in battle. Although Chaos Knight's strength is only at the beginning of the epic level, the attack power of Grom's mirror clone is not even at the sky level. The clone with all the attributes of Chaos Knight can easily disperse Grom's mirror clone, even if it cannot use skills. When a large number of mirror clones are disillusioned, Grom's original body is also easily found. Chaos Knight personally finds this Orc Sword Master and fights with him. Compared with Chaos Knight's illusion skill, the only thing worth praising about Grom's mirror clone is probably that the cooldown time is very short. After his mirror clones were destroyed by Chaos Knight's clones one by one, he quickly transformed into several more mirror clones, which were defeated by Chaos Knight's clones. However, the most exciting thing was the battle between the two. Speaking of which, Grom, as a Sword Master, and Chaos Knight also have the same passive skill, Critical Strike. Chaos Knight's ultimate move is somewhat similar to the Sword Master's mirror clone but stronger. The two heroes are still quite similar. But compared to the Sword Master Grom, who is more like an assassin than a warrior, Chaos Knight is a bit stronger than Grom in frontal combat. At least, Chaos Knight still has a powerful attack skill Chaos Arrow, and the Sword Master's Wind Step, which can bring extra damage, still has extra damage under the effect of appearing dust and sentry ward, but without that kind of suddenness, its effectiveness is greatly reduced. Because he also had several clones, Chaos Knight could always accurately find the location of Grom's real body among several mirror clones, and from time to time he would throw a Chaos Arrow at him. For a while, he, who was slightly weaker, actually tied with Grom. After fighting with Chaos Knight for a while, Grom felt something was not good. This powerful blood elf who could release clones like himself, and whose clones were stronger, and could occasionally burst out several times the attack was enough to match him. The key point was that this blood elf warrior was surrounded by countless friendly troops, while he was alone in the depths. If this continued, he might not only fail to kill a large number of blood elf magicians, but also have to leave his life here. With this thought, Grom began to retreat. Although the invisibility effect of Wind Step no longer existed under the effects of appearing dust and sentry guard, the acceleration effect was still there. After having the intention to retreat, Grom immediately used Wind Step to escape. Although the powerful blood elf could fight against him head on, he had no control skills. As for the ordinary blood elf cavalry around him, they were too far behind in strength to leave him behind. Grom thought clearly and fled decisively. Unfortunately, it was too late for him to run now. Grom, whose speed suddenly increased by several percent after activating the wind step, suddenly felt a mysterious force exerted on him. Looking down at the ground, he saw a halo covering a wide range that had included him. This halo was the degraded halo of the Omni-Knight, which could greatly reduce the attack speed and movement speed of enemies within the range. The acceleration effect of Grom's wind step disappeared under the effect of the degraded halo. Grom, who felt bad, immediately decided to cast Bladderstorm. However, he no longer expected to rely on this ultimate skill to kill the Blood Elf magician, but to use it to escape. However, his last move still failed to save his life. Just when Grom was about to start Bladderstorm, he was suddenly linked to a Blood Elf in a red robe not far away with several fireballs swimming around his body by a blue chain. Then, Grom found that his Bladderstorm could not be used. After carefully feeling it, he found that the energy value of the skill cast by the god-given power was not enough to cast Bladderstorm. And the culprit of all this was the blue chain. This blue chain was naturally the magic sucking skill of the blood mage, which could absorb energy from the enemy into his own body. Now it was used by the blood mage to absorb Grom's energy, making him unable to use Bladderstorm. Then, the blood mage raised his hand and sent Grom into exile. In the exile state, Grom could not even do ordinary attacks. Although he could cast skills, it was useless now without energy. Just like that, Grom was useless. But the Blood Elves still didn't want to let Grom go. To be precise, Yufei didn't want to let Grom go. Some high-level Blood Elf magicians who were attacking City 13 instantly turned their guns to Grom, who was in the exile state. Dozens of high-level magics immediately covered the place where Grom was. Units in the exile state will receive an additional 66% magic damage. Under dozens of high-level magics, that increased the damage by 2/3. The once rampant Grom was directly destroyed. Grom, who originally came out to sneak attack and kill the Blood Elf magician, eventually died under the magic of the Blood Elf magician. This may be a tragic fate for Grom, but it made Yufei breathe a sigh of relief. Oh, I can't stop writing this last chapter. I wrote 500 more words and it almost exceeded 12 o'clock equals. Chapter 598, Cain Bloodhoof's counterattack. Cain Bloodhoof and City number 13 did not see the death of Swordmaster Grom. However, after a long time, Cain Bloodhoof still did not see the huge blade storm in the Blood Elf camp outside the city, nor did he see Grom return. Cain Bloodhoof gradually developed a feeling of uneasiness in his heart. In the past, Grom had never failed when attacking the mage group of the human army, and he was often able to catch all the enemy's well-hidden magicians. Although the number of Blood Elf magicians seemed to be a little more this time, Grom would not be silent for such a long time. After waiting for a while, and finding that the offensive of the Blood Elf magicians not only did not weaken, but became more fierce, Cain Bloodhoof gave up hope on Grom. It seems that even Grom, who is called the Magician Killer, is in danger in front of these Blood Elves. As one of the new Orcs' high-ranking officials, Cain Bloodhoof's mind is very firm. There is a high possibility that Grom has been killed by the Blood Elves. Now he can only rely on himself and the remaining Orc troops under his command. Actually, it is not right to say that they are still alive. Most of the Orc soldiers in City 13 are still alive. The magic bombing of the Blood Elves is a carpet bombing from near to far, mainly to clear a place for the Blood Elves melee soldiers to fight, but they did not deliberately kill the Orc soldiers who were hiding. After hesitating for a moment, Cain Bloodhoof decided not to continue to dodge magic like this, but to rush forward head on and fight to the death. Although there is no illusion of boiling a frog in warm water in SLAs, the principle is the same. Cain Bloodhoof knew that if the Blood Elf magicians continued to use magic, although it seemed that the Orcs had not suffered large-scale losses for the time being, after all the cover was flattened, they would not even have a chance to resist. City 13 is a fortress city in the canon occupation zone of the Orcs. There are not only 200,000 new Orc recruits, but also tens of thousands of elite troops originally under Cain Bloodhoof. Among the tens of thousands of troops, there are quite a few Tauren of the same clan as Cain Bloodhoof. The Tauren who have received the god-given power are very strong on average, which is also the source of Cain Bloodhoof's confidence in fighting the Blood Elves to the death. Cain Bloodhoof gritted his teeth and gave the order to let the Tauren rush to the front with some heartache. The magic resistance of ordinary orc warriors is too low. Even if they are hit by 2 more low-level magics, they will be seriously injured or even die. Only by letting the Tauren fight in the front can the orc army rush through the magic coverage area and really fight the Blood Elves. As a noble hero among the orcs, Cain Bloodhoof did not hide behind to command the battle, but took the brunt of it and rushed to the front with his fellow Tauren. With a roar to the sky, a dark yellow halo covered the Tauren around Cain Bloodhoof. The Tauren and some ordinary orc warriors in the halo range only felt that they were running much faster because of the wind under their feet, and the arms seemed to become more relaxed. If you attack the enemy, you should be able to hit more. This is the aura skill of Cain Bloodhoof, the durability aura, which can increase the movement speed and attack speed of friendly forces within the range of action. It is an aura that can significantly improve the combat effectiveness of the troops. Unfortunately, when Cain Bloodhoof opened the durability aura and led the orc troops to rush out a distance in the rain of magic bullets, he and the surrounding Tauren and some orc warriors felt that the movement speed and attack speed bonus attached to the durability aura suddenly disappeared. Not only that, they also felt that the strength in their bodies seemed to be slightly drained away, and their bodies became a little weak. Both the footsteps and arms were heavier. Unfortunately, although Cain Bloodhoof has the durability aura, Omni-Knight, one of the 3 heroes of the Blood Elves, has a degeneration aura that is tit for tat. It happened that the degeneration aura that weakened the enemy's movement speed and attack speed offset the effect of Cain Bloodhoof's durability aura, and because of the higher skill level, a small part of it was also applied to the Tauren who rushed to the front. If the degeneration aura had dampened the orcs' high morale under the blessing of the durability aura and the encouragement of Cain's Bloodhoof, then the Blood Mage's subsequent behavior had completely dissipated the orcs' morale. A mysterious spell was uttered, and a clear sound suddenly came from the sky. Both the Blood Elves and the orcs on the ground felt that the air had suddenly become much hotter. Looking up, why did 2 suns appear in the sky? Although Slays had 3 moons, there was only 1 sun. It was the first time for these orcs to see 2 suns shining in the sky, and they couldn't help but widen their eyes. However, after careful observation, everyone found that it was not a second sun, but a giant bird of fire emitting infinite light. This was the Fire Phoenix summoned by the Blood Mage, but Slays did not have the Fire Phoenix species, so it was understood by the orcs as a giant bird of fire. The Blood Mage summoned the Fire Phoenix, of course, not to act as a second sun. Under the command of the Blood Mage, the Fire Phoenix rang again, and then quickly dived towards the Orc vanguard. In the game, the Fire Phoenix, as an air unit, is a long-range unit, and can only attack the enemy by spitting out fire streams. But in reality, this limitation certainly does not exist. The flames spitting out from a distance obviously cannot quickly cause fatal damage to the thick-skinned Tauren. Therefore, the Fire Phoenix chose to dive down directly and attack with its body under the command of the Blood Mage. Compared with the fire stream spit out as a means of attack, the temperature of the flames on the surface of the Fire Phoenix is actually a little lower. However, the coverage of the 2 is incomparable. The size of the Fire Phoenix is not small. The swooping down flaming body affected hundreds of Tauren, including Cain Bloodhoof. Cain Bloodhoof's eyes were red when the Fire Phoenix landed on him and the surrounding Minotaurs. He stepped heavily on his raised bullhoof. A visible wave spread to the area around him and hit the Fire Phoenix. War trampling. Cain Bloodhoof could naturally see how serious the consequences would be if such a big firebird landed in his orc camp, so he released his ranged stun skill at the moment the Fire Phoenix landed, trying to control the big firebird. However, the ripples of War Trample hit the Fire Phoenix, but it did not cause any effect. Not only did the stun effect not appear, but even the incidental damage of this skill did not appear. Cain Bloodhoof was stunned. He did not understand what was going on. If he could see one of the attributes of the Fire Phoenix like Euphony and the Blood Magician, then he would not be confused. Magic immunity, passive skill, so that units with this skill are not affected by any magic. Although the magic immunity effect varies depending on the strength of the possessor, the actual effect of not immune to any magic in the description will be reduced, but the strength of the Fire Phoenix itself is epic, so it is naturally immune to the skills of Cairn Bloodhoof, which is also at the epic level. Warstomp did not control the Fire Phoenix, so it was able to freely spread its flames in the orc camp. Without the need to bother to breathe, the Fire Phoenix can cause a lot of damage to even the thick-skinned Tauren by just rolling in the orc army. However, the Fire Phoenix is not small in size, but there is only one. With this summoned creature, it can only hit the morale of the orcs and cause some riots, but it can't actually stop the orcs' counterattack. But, compared to the charge, who are the Blood Elves afraid of? Most of the orcs are just infantry and want to launch a counterattack against the Blood Elf Knights guarding the front, which is simply too funny. Compared with the Tauren, the ordinary Scholar Knights may not be their opponents, but the Scholar Knights who have advanced to the level of Blood Rage Knights and Asylum Knights are slightly stronger than the Tauren. Even if it was just the Lancers and the Shield Cavalry, they would be able to match the Tauren together. Not to mention, the orcs only had one hero, Cairn Bloodhoof, while the Blood Elves had 3 heroes. The difference was really big. Cairn Bloodhoof's durability aura had been offset by the Omnanite's degradation aura and even slightly suppressed. What's more, as a warrior hero, Cairn Bloodhoof didn't have any other skills for supporting troops. What he wanted to do now was to rush into the Blood Elves camp under the cover of the orc soldiers and perfectly perform the Echo Blast. If Cairn Bloodhoof knew that there was an equipment called Kola's Escape Dagger in the Miracle Ancient Tree of the Night Elves, and knew the effect of this equipment, which was simply called the Jump Dagger, he would definitely pay a lot of money to buy it. In the game, the Jump Dagger is almost a must-have equipment for the Tauren. Of course, even if Cairn Bloodhoof paid a lot of money to buy it, Yufei would not give it to him. Speaking of which, the Night Elves have always sold only the enchanted equipment exchanged in the Hunter's Hall. The items purchased from the Miracle Ancient Tree have never been circulated. Without a Blink Dagger, Cairn Bloodhoof needs to break through the Blood Elves' defenses and rush into the enemy camp if he wants to release a perfect Echo Slam. Echo Slam can only exert maximum damage when surrounded by enemies. It is impossible to break through the Blood Elf Knight's defenses in front of the Omni Knight. Seeing Cairn Bloodhoof gasping for breath with red eyes, rushing towards the front row of Sanctuary Knights surrounded by a group of Tauren, the Omni Knight decisively used his ultimate skill, Guardian Angel. Guardian Angel makes surrounding friendly units immune to physical attacks, increases armor by 1000 points, and increases life regeneration by 25 points/second. There is only this chapter today. I ran to the suburbs, the bus had problems twice, and I ended up sitting in a black bread. It was so painful. Chapter 599, Demonstration of Power. In fact, the effect of the Guardian Angel is not absolutely invincible, but the armor value in Warcraft means comprehensive damage reduction. Adding 1000 points of armor can indeed be regarded as invincible. Even if an ordinary Scholar Knight faces a hero like Cairn Bloodhoof, he will not be easily killed or even injured. And even if some of the Scholar Knights who were attacked by Cairn Bloodhoof due to the difference in strength were slightly injured, they were quickly wiped out by the terrifying life recovery provided by the Guardian Angel. As for ordinary Tauren and Orc soldiers, don't even think about causing damage to the Scholar Knights blessed by the Guardian Angel. Cairn Bloodhoof anxiously wanted to rush into the Scholar Knight formation to open the Echo Wave to improve the disadvantage of the orcs on the battlefield, but he was surprised to find that, even if he took the lead in the charge, he still couldn't break through the outermost defense line of the Scholar Knights. Those Scholar Knights who were suddenly covered with golden light seemed to become invincible, and they couldn't be killed or even repelled. Fortunately, Cairn Bloodhoof was not as simple-minded as Grom. When he found that he couldn't kill the Bloody Knights with golden light, he suddenly had an idea and stepped on the war trample, which stunned the Bloody Knights who were as difficult to deal with as sticky candy. Although the Guardian Angel can make the affected unit almost immune to damage, it can't exempt the effects other than damage. For example, the damage of Cairn Bloodhoof's war trample could not be reflected on the Bloody Knights around him, but the dizziness was unavoidable. Then, Cairn Bloodhoof took the opportunity to escape from these Bloody Knights with the blessing of the Guardian Angel, and chose to break through from another direction. This is a good idea. The Guardian Angel is not an aura skill. The range is not that large. it can only cover a small area around the Omni Knight. The Omni Knight was caught off guard and was stunned by the war trample with a large range among the bloody knights. For a while, he really couldn't keep up with Cain Bloodhoof's pace, so he broke through the other bloody knights without the blessing of the guardian angel and entered the middle of the bloody knights formation. After waking up from the dizzy state, the Omni Knight's face changed drastically. Euphony had told the 3 Blood Elf heroes about the effect of Echo Slam. He naturally knew that he couldn't let Cain Bloodhoof release Echo Slam in the middle of a large number of Blood Elves. In that case, even if the Blood Elves could defeat the Orcs here in the end, they would still suffer heavy losses. It was precisely because he knew that the Echo Slam could bring a lot of damage that the Omni Knight decisively used his ultimate move when Cain Bloodhoof rushed over with some Tauren in order to prevent Cain Bloodhoof from rushing into the Blood Elf formation. Unexpectedly, he was stunned by Cain Bloodhoof without paying attention, allowing him to take advantage of the opportunity. Now the Omni Knight had no way to stop Cain Bloodhoof for a while. His speed was about the same as Cain Bloodhoof, and it was impossible for him to follow Cain Bloodhoof wherever he went and bring the Blood Knight there into the Guardian Angel state. As for the other 3 skills, the Degraded Aura is a Nora skill. Although it has always played a great role on the battlefield, it can't do more. Although Baptism, as a healing skill, can cause holy damage to enemies around the healing target, it does not have a stun effect and cannot block Cain Bloodhoof. Another skill, Expel, can defend against Cain Bloodhoof's Echo Slam and other skill attacks, but it can only be cast on one friendly unit. The Omni Knight regretted not casting Expel on himself first and then activating Guardian Angel to bless others. In this way, he would not be unable to keep up with Cain Bloodhoof after being stunned. Fortunately, there is more than one hero in the Blood Elf army. Just as Cain Bloodhoof found a good position and was ready to activate Echo Slam, a dark purple magic arrow suddenly shot at him. Then Cain Bloodhoof fell into a stun state and could not cast Echo Slam immediately. This dark purple magic arrow is Chaos Knight's attack skill, Chaos Arrow. This skill with a short cooldown time can not only cause some damage, but also has a random stun effect of 1 to 4 seconds. Fortunately, this time Chaos Arrow just hit the highest stun effect of 4 seconds. What can be done in 4 seconds? Even if the surrounding Blood Knights focused their fire, it was impossible to kill the tough Tauren hero Cain Bloodhoof within 4 seconds. Then when Cain Bloodhoof recovered from the stun effect, he could still cast the Echo Slam that he had not cast just now. This situation was not what the Blood Elves were happy to see, and they did not allow it to happen in the end. Almost at the same time when the Chaos Knight released the Arrow of Chaos, a blue light connected the Blood Mage and Cain Bloodhoof. Although in a daze, Cain Bloodhoof could still feel the flow in his body. He panicked and found that in just 4 seconds, the energy value in his body that he relied on to cast the god-given ability had been consumed to the point where he could not use the Echo Slam. If Grom had not died in the hands of the Blood Elves, but ran back to City 13 to warn Cain Bloodhoof, perhaps Cain Bloodhoof would not be so easily hit now. But unfortunately, Grom was unable to escape the Blood Elves' siege, so Cain Bloodhoof was hit without any preparation. Although the stun effect of Chaos Bolt only lasts for 4 seconds, like Grom, warrior heroes like Cain Bloodhoof have a relatively short energy bar, which means that the energy used to release God's gift skills is not enough. The Blood Mage's mana sucking is very large. 4 seconds is enough for the Blood Mage to almost empty Cain Bloodhoof's energy. The most threatening Echo Smash must not be released. After recovering from the stun state, the first thing Cain Bloodhoof did was to shoot a groove towards the source of the blue light on his body. The Blood Mage was trying his best to completely suck Cain Bloodhoof's energy, and he was not prepared for his skills. This time, he was hit by Cain Bloodhoof's groove, and was temporarily stunned, and the magic sucking effect was interrupted. Unfortunately, even if the magic sucking effect was interrupted, Cain Bloodhoof could only use himself as a large soldier at this time. The energy that was about to be sucked out by the Blood Mage was completely emptied after he shot a groove, so there was no way he could release the Echo Smash. Cain Bloodhoof, who was unable to release skills, was not that threatening. Chaos Knight's ultimate skill, Illusion, had just been used to fight Grom, so it naturally had not cooled down at this moment. However, facing an epic level strongman without skills, even if he was at the peak of the epic level, Chaos Knight would not be afraid. A reality rift was released, and Chaos Knight rushed to Cairn Bloodhoof and fought with him. Cairn Bloodhoof, who had no energy value, could only face the current situation helplessly and entangled with Chaos Knight for the time being. If Cairn Bloodhoof failed to open up the situation, then the life of the Orc soldiers would be very difficult. Although they rushed towards the Blood Elf camp with great momentum, the Blood Elf magicians behind the Bloody Knight seemed very calm, with no intention of retreating, and kept pouring out magic. Therefore, the Orc troops rushed to the Bloody Knight in the hail of bullets. On this journey, they had already suffered a lot of losses. Even if they managed to break through to the front of the Scarlet Knights, they were already exhausted physically and mentally, and could not get any good in the hands of the Scarlet Knights who were waiting for them. The Fire Phoenix summoned by the Blood Mage was now attacking freely. At that time, when Cairn Bloodhoof was restrained by the Omni Knight, the Tauren no longer needed it. After all, the Taurens were relatively thick-skinned, and the killing ability of the Fire Phoenix was difficult to fully manifest. However, if it was just bullying ordinary Orc warriors, then the killing power of the Fire Phoenix would be devastating. The Fire Phoenix first flew in the air, and then hit any place that was not satisfactory, and then spit out a breath of fire, turning many green-skinned Orcs into ashes. The Fire Phoenix was so excited that it felt that its killing desire could not be satisfied by its breath alone. The Fire Phoenix even gave up the safe attack in the air and swooped down again to burn the Orcs below with its body. The Fire Phoenix was surrounded by high temperature flames, or in other words, the Fire Phoenix itself was a polymer of flames, similar to the existence of a flame elf. Therefore, it was like a fire, and the blazing flames burned countless Orc warriors. Cairn Bloodhoof had been surrounded by the Scarlet Knight formation, so he naturally could not make effective commands. Although the Orc warriors believed in their own leader, and Cairn Bloodhoof, one of the rare heroes among the new Orcs, could not fall so easily, they still inevitably had many bad guesses in their hearts, and their morale dropped sharply. When the Orc warriors and the Scarlet Knights were entangled in a battle, the offensive of the Blood Elf magicians slowed down. This was not because they had no magic points. The Blood Elf magicians who had the energy saving casting talent and the Blood Elf witches to help restore the magic points were not as poor as Cairn Bloodhoof. The reason for slowing down the magic attack was that in reality, magic had no ability to identify enemies and friends, and the Blood Elf magicians did not want their magic to accidentally hurt friendly forces. Most of their magic was poured towards some Orcs in the back. However, even without the magic that kept falling, the Orcs fighting with the Scarlet Knights still looked defeated. Cairn Bloodhoof was too far away from these Orc warriors to be covered by the durability aura, but the Omni Knight's degradation aura could affect them. With this weakening, the Orcs, who were already somewhat unable to defeat the Scarlet Knight, soon showed a state of defeat. Chapter 600, Cairn Bloodhoof is captured. The Orcs' defeat was deemed when Grom sneaked out of City 13 and tried to attack the Blood Elf magicians. If Grom had not done what he did, which led to his own fall at the hands of the Blood Elves, then even if the Blood Elf hero could control Cairn Bloodhoof so that he could not cast Echo Slam, Grom, as a sword master, could also roll up a Blade Storm to open up the situation for the Orcs. But now Grom is dead, and Cairn Bloodhoof is trapped under the care of Chaos Knights and Blood Mages. After summoning up the courage to fight the Scarlet Knights for a while without a strong man and without a commander, the Orcs still cannot avoid the fate of defeat. The cooperation of the Scarlet Knights is really tacit. Although the Scarlet Knights seem to be less flexible than the Orcs in battle because of their mounts, in actual combat, the Scarlet Knights manipulate their horses as if they were their own bodies. Often when the Orc warriors saw an opportunity to attack, the shield cavalry would block them. Then the lancers would use their spears to stab the Orc warriors, causing damage to them. The elite Blood Rage Knights and Asylum Knights were stronger than the Tauren, and were just small bosses in front of the ordinary Orc warriors. The Asylum Knights were so tough that they could not be cut, while the Blood Rage Knights killed the Orc warriors like cutting melons and vegetables. Even if they were injured, they would recover quickly under the effect of life stealing. Not only the ordinary Orc warriors, but even Cairn Bloodhoof gradually lost the desire to fight. Being stared at by two Blood Elf heroes, and surrounded by a large number of Asylum Knights, to prevent him from escaping, Cairn Bloodhoof could not see the possibility of a comeback. As soon as the blood mage's magic sucking cooled down, it would be applied to Cairn Bloodhoof from a distance. The key is that the cooldown time of this skill is not long, and Cairn Bloodhoof has been in an awkward situation of no mana available. The Chaos Knight who was fighting against him became more and more courageous. The chaos arrows that were released, as long as they were on cooldown and the occasional critical hits made Cairn Bloodhoof miserable. The key was that the feeling of being able to passively withstand the enemy's skills without being able to counterattack was too frustrating. The final outcome was soon clear. Cairn Bloodhoof, who had been unable to release skills, was gradually dragged down by the Chaos Knights who were constantly replenishing their health and magicians with Blood Elf priests and Blood Elf witches. In the end, he even fought to the point of exhaustion and coma. The Orc troops also turned into a rout in front of the Bloody Knights, who were gradually launching a counterattack. However, City number 13 had been plowed several times by the Blood Elf magicians, and was no longer a place that could provide cover. The Orc warriors could only step out of their legs, scatter and try their best to escape to the distance. However, the extremely large number of Blood Elf magicians had not been attacked by the Orcs until now, and they were still full of energy, and had some magic points left. The fleeing Orcs had to continue to face the baptism of magic. These Orcs are blood and flesh resources, so the Blood Elves will not let them go easily. In addition to the long-range pursuit of the Blood Magicians, the Blood Knights also rode on unicorns to pursue the Orcs, not giving the Orcs any chance to escape. Under the double pursuit, only a few Orcs were able to escape. The Orcs did not know what deep hatred the Blood Elves had with them, and they wanted to kill them all. Didn't they say that the Blood Elves that appeared at the beginning just asked for some living supplies? Although the so-called some was a bit too many, the Orcs naturally didn't know that in the eyes of the Blood Elves, they were the nutrients necessary for the growth of the new tribesmen, and they were things. When hunters face food, they will naturally not let the food escape easily. However, regardless of whether the relationship between the Blood Elves and the Orcs is the relationship between hunters and food or something else, at least after the Battle of City number 13, the army of the cannon-occupied area of the Orcs was emptied. Although there are still some Orc defenders in each city, they are not enough in front of the Blood Elf army. Before the Orcs could react to what happened in the cannon-occupied area, the Blood Elf troops, led by 3 heroes, took down 10 cities again. This was because the Blood Elves were now united, and did not split up to attack, otherwise the results would have been even more impressive. As for Cairn Bloodhoof, he was captured instead of being killed directly. This was Euphene's decision. Although after killing Grom, and occupying more than 20 cities of the Orcs, the Blood Elves were probably already hostile to the Orcs and there was no room for easing. But Cairn Bloodhoof was an Orc hero, and it was a pity to kill him like this. After repeated consideration, Euphene decided to spare his life for the time being. Besides, Cairn Bloodhoof had the skill of rebirth. If you really want to execute this guy, you have to kill him twice, which is really strange. When the Blood Elf army captured the city in the Orc cannon-occupied area like autumn wind sweeping fallen leaves, the Orc high-level officials finally realized what happened there. In fact, the Orc leaders have been paying attention to the situation in the cannon-occupied area. In their decision, this is related to whether to launch a full-scale attack on the human world in the end. However, under the pursuit of the Blood Elves, there were too few Orcs escaping from City 13, so the Orc leaders were unable to get the news in time. After learning the situation in the cannon-occupied area from an Orc warrior who personally experienced the battle in City 13, the Orc leaders felt cold in their hearts. Originally, they hoped that Cairn Bloodhoof and Grom would be able to defeat the Blood Elves and run back to participate in the full-scale attack on the human world. Even if the Blood Elves are more difficult to deal with for a while, at least they should be able to entangle them, so that they can attack humans with peace of mind. But the Orc leaders never expected that Cairn Bloodhoof and Grom would lose so miserably. Although Grom is missing, according to the situation at the time, he may have fallen, and Cairn Bloodhoof was directly captured. The 200,000 Orc recruits and part of the original Orc troops in the cannon-occupied area were almost wiped out. Such a situation is too tragic. The key is that the Orcs will not be able to take advantage of the chaos in the human world to conquer more territory or even destroy the human race. This makes the Orcs very entangled. In the royal city of Bori, the meeting of the Orcs high-level officials began again. However, this time, there were too fewer Orcs in the hall, and the atmosphere was very solemn. During the discussion, the Orcs' high-level officials were obviously divided into two factions. Some of the Orcs felt that the current opportunity was rare, and it would be difficult to fight when the humans stabilized if they did not launch an attack while the humans were in chaos. Some of them felt that if the Blood Elves were not dealt with, even if some new territory was conquered, it would still be a loss. The two factions of Orcs argued endlessly, and Vol'jin, the most prestigious witch doctor, watched the two factions of Orcs' red-faced and thick-necked arguments calmly. But in his heart, a deep sorrow surged. The focus of the debate between the two factions of Orcs' high-level officials was how to choose the next war. No Orc high-level official proposed how to rescue Cairn Bloodhoof, and no one remembered Grom. Witch Doctor Vol'jin knew that this situation was inevitable. The Orcs had always lived in a divided tribe, and they did not have a strong sense of belonging to the Orc race. Fortunately, with the emergence of God's power, most of the Orcs were barely united by the division of the new and ancient Orcs. Although these powerful Orc leaders felt familiar with each other because of the God Soul, their relationship was not very harmonious. There were not many Orc leaders, and one more person would give them a few more powers, and one less person would increase the power held by the Orc leaders. Therefore, they tacitly did not mention the matter of Cairn Bloodhoof and Grom. But Witch Doctor Vol'jin was different. The reason why the Orc leaders were willing to accept Witch Doctor Vol'jin's leadership to a certain extent was that all the Orcs who had mastered the healing ability among the new Orcs were under the jurisdiction of Witch Doctor Vol'jin. With this power, it was natural for Witch Doctor Vol'jin to have a higher status. And Witch Doctor Vol'jin himself also took it as his responsibility to safeguard the interests of the Orcs. Although he was a little sad about the capture of Cairn Bloodhoof and the death of Grom, his reason told him that the more beneficial option was to continue the plan to attack the human world. After a difficult weighing of the pros and cons, Witch Doctor Vol'jin finally chose to support the attack on the human world. As for the cannon-occupied area, let them mess around for now. Send some troops to guard the ever-burning trail and ensure the smooth flow of traffic with the original territory of the Orcs. After the victory in the human world, it will not be too late to go back and deal with the Blood Elves. With the addition of Witch Doctor Vol'jin, the Orc leaders who attacked the human world had the upper hand. Finally, under the persuasion of Witch Doctor Vol'jin, other Orc leaders also reluctantly agreed to attack the human world. After all, the opportunity was rare. It was just like the last time they made the decision to launch a full-scale attack on the human world. There was news from Cyril. This time, after the Orc leaders reluctantly reached a consensus, new unfavorable news came. Report. The ancient Orcs launched an attack on our remaining troops. Many tribes were defeated, and the elderly, the weak, women and children were looted. The Orc leaders who had just walked out of the hall listened with dazed eyes to the news brought by the messenger who came all the way from the Orcs' original territory. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.